justice for all. Commissioner Beard is representing us at another meeting this morning, and he will join us as soon as he can. Colleagues, the agenda has been distributed. Does anyone have any amendments to the agenda? If not, it will stand approved as distributed. In our packets were the minutes of the September 3rd, 2019 County Board meeting. Any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I'll move them. Second.
So moved and seconded to approve the September 3rd, 2019 minutes of the Scott County Board meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. On to the part of our agenda where we recognize interested citizens. If you're here to speak to the board on a matter that's not on the agenda, please approach the podium, state your name and address. We're limited to 5 minutes per subject or person. All right, seeing no one, we'll move on to our Scott County Delivers topic today. Chris Harder will get us started.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We're here this morning to talk about investments in technology and really more importantly, the efficiencies that we hope to gain through those investments. That idea of buying technology and investing in efficiency is part of our existing strategic plan, and it's also part of the bigger goals of using taxpayer money wisely, building transparency in government, and running a well-run government agency. I think it's an important conversation to have today. We've all been a part of budget conversations recently, and we've talked about the amount of money that the county expends and allocates to support the purchase and maintenance of technology. And so the whole point of what we're going to talk about this morning is, are we getting the most out of that investment? Are we getting the most out of that investment? So we have a group of folks here today, all of whom have had investments made in technology in their work areas. And we're going to ask them to tell you a little bit about their stories and share some of their data and how it relates to efficiencies. Along the way, we're also going to talk about some systems that either support most efficient use of technology, or perhaps where there's some gaps or some places where we can make improvements. We are going to try to keep this at a level of detail that is helpful. I think it's a very technical area, obviously, so we're going to try to stay at a place that's helpful and not get too into the weeds. And I think that our panelists are ready to do that. So, with that, I'd like to introduce Jake Rusing, our library director.
We were stalling, Jake.
I was at the same meeting as Commissioner Beard was at. So.
Pam Selvig, Health and Human Services Director.
Lisa Brodsky, Public Health Director.
Troy Beam, Transit and Fleet Manager for Scott County.
Jeff Peichel, Chief Information Officer.
Adam Puri, Sheriff's Office.
Connie Perilla, Business Relationship Manager.
Carrie Ouimet, Economic Assistance Director.
Julie Anson, Property and Customer Service Manager.
Cindy Geis, Customer Services Director.
Cindy, you were going to make some opening comments as the kind of the leader of this group.
Well, they chose, to make sure that we didn't get too far in the weeds, they picked the weakest link. They said, she can open the statement because she doesn't know much about technology at all. However, in my area, we have had almost every system replaced or is in the midst of being replaced. So I guess for the purposes of, at least in this presentation, having some data, I'm here to at least open it up for you, but definitely will not get too technical. If I am, I'm shooting from the hip and definitely don't know what I'm talking about. As the county grows, we constantly hear we have to work smarter. We have to work more efficiently. How can we change up what we do, and how can we use technology to get us there? And technology may be the solution, but it's not always the only solution. There has to be a mix, and we have to make sure that when we buy into this technology, that it truly is providing us our return that we're expecting. In 2016, the county made a very concerted effort to say we're going to transform ourselves from the technical side, and we're going to move in a couple different directions that we haven't seen in the past. And they made some major strides in how they were organized, and in some of the software applications that we have, and say, do we keep them here on-prem or do we move them off-site? What makes the most sense? Do we have our technical services supported by internal staff, or do we move them off-prem as well and have them have more of a managed services type of a mechanism? So we started that, and in there, we had a multi-year blueprint of this is our roadmap, this is what we're gonna do, and we'll see how we get there. And the implementation is as a service model, including infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, and security as a service are all areas that we started thinking about when we made conscious decisions and as projects came forward. Is it better to have them on-prem, or is it better to have them hosted? If it's hosted, is it managed up by a vendor, or is it managed by our technical team? In addition, we had our governance, and we had to make sure that we matured our governance to be that body of people that can help challenge projects as they come forward and ask those strategic questions. Probably not coming from me. I do serve on governance, but I'm very quiet, so I try not to inject my voice very often. So this is the first Technology Scott Delivers session. And with that, we kind of took a look back over the course of the last 5 years and said, what did we do? And how long have these systems been in place that we can have some fairly decent data that maybe we can talk to our return on investment. So one of the lessons learned through this endeavor was, what were we looking to measure? Our charters, our current charter draft has an area in it that says we need to measure these things, and this is what we're hoping to bring back to say, were we successful or were we not? The problem is that we did not do a good job of going back to that charter and say, did we realize what we were expecting? We also, before the draft of that charter, we came before you as the leaders and the decision makers of this county and the citizens of our county and said, we're going to invest in this, and this is what we're hoping we're going to bring to the table, either internal or external. We didn't look back at those board agenda items and said, did we achieve what we were expecting? So lessons learned, we have to do a better job. But from that, we did move forward, and we got some information that we thought was valuable. We can do a better job, and we are hoping the next time we come through, we will do a better job. But the best things that we can think about, the strategies that we're focusing on, is to better serve our citizens through online transactions and online information, to have our workforce be more agile, be more mobile and more technology abled in the field as well as here, and then provide as a service applications and environments in the cloud. So lastly, the one thing that we need to start thinking about is our internal IT department. What's their long-term strategy? Where are they going to be in 5 years and 10 years? And how do we kind of change what we do to help them get there? And that will take the support of all of us. So with that, I will turn it over to the panel.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to start, and Carrie, I'd like to start with you, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Okay. So you brought forward 3 slides today to talk about some of the efficiencies or some of the innovations that came through technology in your area. And so those are on pages
22, 23, and 24.
Thank you. So I wonder if, just for kind of an introduction, if you could just look at those 3 slides and just kind of tell us the story about your system and what this data says to you about what efficiencies were gained in your area.
Sure. So the system that these 3 slides are referencing is CaseWorks, which is a document management system, and it is currently being utilized within our economic assistance department in both child support and our income maintenance units. And the slides 22 and 23 are very similar to one another. We have a measure that has been developed by the Department of Human Services, and this is a measure that every county is held to, and it's about timely processing of both SNAP, which is our food support, and cash applications. And the only difference between these 2 slides is that the first slide on page 22 is our expedited applications, which there are certain folks that will qualify for expedited food support. And this is just a food support only slide, and that means that the eligibility specialists must process those applications within 1 business day or within 24 hours of receiving that application. And the second slide on page 23 is also timely processing, but this includes both cash and SNAP, and this is processing within 30 days, which is our standard processing timelines. So the purposes of these slides is to show, if you look at the graph, the line that is drawn between 2010 and 2011, that is to illustrate when our document management system, which was then known as ScottWorks, which has now evolved into CaseWorks, was implemented within income maintenance. And if you look at kind of what our processing outcomes were starting in 2011 and therefore after, you can see a significant increase in our timeliness. For our expedited SNAP, we saw comparing 2010 to 2011, so 2010 prior to implementation, then looking at 2011, our timeliness increased by 12.5%, which was a really significant jump if you kind of look at the overall county average. And then looking on page 23, we saw a 6.1% increase between 2010 and 2011. And we have continued to perform between 3 and 18% higher than prior to having the document management system. And we are performing well above the state average in our timely processing. So it's one way to illustrate what we believe is a lot of efficiencies that we've gained from CaseWorks and being able to serve our citizens and process their applications in a more timely and quick fashion. And then page 24 is kind of looking at our department as a whole. This does not include employment and training. I just want to note, because in employment and training, we are not currently using CaseWorks. But on this slide, we took a point in time in July of 2010, which was prior to having CaseWorks, or a document management system. And then we looked at the same point in time of July of 2019, 9 years later, to show these are the number of folks we are serving in each of these programs, and also to show how many FTEs we had. So while you'll see our biggest increase in folks that we've served is within medical assistance, this was due to the Affordable Care Act, we had a 49% increase in the number of people we've served in 9 years, but only a 19% increase in our staffing complement. And we really feel that we've been able to maintain timely processing and just an ability to manage all of the documents and the volume and the different programs. We attributed a lot of that to having a document management system and being able to stay organized. Also, if we had that much paperwork, I don't know where we'd put it all. So it's a lot of people.
Thanks, Carrie.
Sure.
Do you folks have questions for, we're going to try to handle this a little
A little
more
different?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm kind of curious. I know we have some pending changes with CaseWorks, Carrie, in terms of potentially being hosted, and I believe there's new iterations coming up. Do you see those future things creating additional efficiencies for us, or?
Yeah, that's what we're hearing. So CaseWorks is on SharePoint, and SharePoint is going to be updated to, we're on SharePoint 2010, it's going to be updated to SharePoint 2016. It'll be in the cloud. We're hearing that the new version of CaseWorks is going to have some different workflows, some added efficiencies. We had some of our current staff doing some testing in the environment, so I think it's NCT, which is our vendor for CaseWorks, has slowly rolled counties into the new version. We haven't experienced it yet with our live data and our production site, but we're hearing good things from the staff that have tested it, so we're hopeful. Good, yeah.
Carrie, is there anything that you can add about your process for selecting the system and selecting a vendor? Like, what kind of supports or what kind of gaps did you experience as you made the decisions about CaseWorks as the software system of choice?
Sure. Well, I will maybe have a disclaimer that this was prior to my time at Scott County. But what I understand is that our income maintenance unit was kind of starting to hear that there were document management systems out there at different meetings that they were attending. There were some counties that had already gone live on some systems, and they were simply running out of space with all of the files and the documents and everything that they were managing. And the county had a relationship with a vendor, And from that, ScottWorks system was built. Income maintenance went live in 2010 on the document management system, and 4 years later, in 2014, ScottWorks evolved into CaseWorks, and then our child support unit went live at the time. I think, at the time, looking at income maintenance, our staff were located at both the government center and at the workforce center. So people were literally driving files and paperwork back and forth or having them couriered. And looking at how many shared clients we had, it was just one way of kind of looking at how can we have everything in one place where anybody can access the files who are authorized to do so at any time. Looking for automation, we started to have some staff that were teleworking, working from home, looking for some automation there, and of course, most importantly, just ways to improve our customer service for the citizens that were coming in and accessing our services.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cindy and Julie, could you guys talk about the program? You had, I think, 7 slides. And let me just tell you that we made one last-minute change to the packet. So if you printed the packet early, we may have some difficulty with page numbers. So, Tracy, if we can, we'll help you. So could you talk about, you have brought forward slides on land records, customer service, building inspections, and elections. So can you help me know how's the best way to break that up and who can speak best to which programs?
I would say Cindy would be the building inspections for sure. And I think we would tag team on the elections. She's got more of the in-depth history than I do, but land records and the customer service stuff I'm more than happy to speak with. And I don't know, I've got some experts in the audience that can help me.
So I wonder if you could start then, Julie, and
Sure.
draw our attention to the slides that you're going to be talking about and just tell the story and a little bit about the data, about the efficiencies gained in your area through the technology.
Absolutely. Why don't we start with page number 13. It should be the land records e-recorded documents slide. I did print this morning, so we should be in good shape. This slide, while it certainly doesn't speak to land records as a whole, and actually if we look maybe at 13 and 14, 14 speaks to land records more as a whole. Land records department is an excellent example of what can happen when you do things more efficiently. So the big efficiency really came out of 13. In 2014, if you look at the slide, the kind of red colored from 2010 to the beginning of 2014 is our Tri-Min recording system. The purple from 2014 onward is when we went live on our Recordees recording package. The difference in the capability of Tri-Min versus Recordees was off the charts. We had a few document types that could be e-recorded, and when I say e-recorded, I mean recorded electronically through a trusted submitter. There's companies out there who have been certified to submit documents. It's not that anyone can go online and record their satisfaction mortgage or their deed or something like that, but through a trusted submitter, they can submit their package electronically. When we were on Tri-Min, we just had a handful of document types that we were able to record that way. When we went live with Recordees, it just kept growing. So we now have hundreds of document types that people can record electronically. There's huge advantages to that, not only to the customer submitting. We are turning those documents back to them within a day versus paper. We still do get a good number of paper documents, of course, but this expansion of this has enabled land record staff to focus on many other things. So when they were hired, maybe they recorded documents, and that's what they did. Now they also work part-time in the passport office. They may work part-time in the customer service department. As we know, we've had a lot of changes in customer service over the last few years and a huge increase in demand. So we've been able to take 2 of their staff, and they work half-time in the customer service area. The rest of the staff works in passports. The other things that they help with are elections They answer phones for all different areas, including taxation. So we've really diversified what those tasks are. On page 14, it shows you the percentage of their hours worked. Land records is that kind of lighter teal color. If you look at the difference between 2014, where there was really barely any other time spent in anything else, versus the time spent year-to-date in 2019, they do spend almost 70% of their time doing land records, but they also spend 16% in customer service, 13% in passports. And in 2019, it's only 1%. We have no elections this year. There is some weekly duties that they take care of for us, but it's not, the amount of time that we spend on an election year. So, great example of, a technology that has done wonders for us.
Just to speak a little bit more to it, rather than just e-recording, we had 13 people in land records back in the day. 13 people that took paper documents, and in our old system, in order to validate that the information was correct, and I don't think anybody here in this room, nor anybody that's listening to us on TV would say, I don't really care whether my document is recorded correctly or not. That's your title to your property. That's extremely important. In order to ensure that, in our old system, they had to take a paper document, used to just frost me. They would enter all the data, and then they would go to another screen and enter it all over again, and then the thing would compare itself and say, does it match? And if it did, it would go forward. I'm like, you do dual entry on every single document? That's craziness. There has to be something better. And it's like, well, this is the way it always had been, an old AS400 application that we all dealt with the green screens and all of that. So it was dramatically different when we went to the Recordees application. So we currently have 7 staff in there rather than 13, and they're diversified in their time. And when we look at 2019, that staff allocation, remember that's year to date, and we just stood up these 2 people in customer service. So that 16% will grow as they commit more of their time into that other area. And so it isn't just, hey, we can e-record faster, we can turn these documents around quicker. We also have a lot of business rules in these applications that say, and by the way, if these things aren't filled in, we're gonna reject it right back to the submitter right off the bat. Otherwise, our staff would take those and they would call the person that submitted and they'd try to get the information that was missing. So there's a lot of efficiency gains in moving to this technology, and it's probably our poster child for probably the best decision that Scott County had. And not only that, it didn't break the bank to bring it in. So fantastic. In the meantime, the same company that brought this in developed our vitals licenses and permit system. We don't have that here because we don't have the data for it yet, but they developed that for us free of charge. They're charging their other customers, but we had a need because everything that we had in those areas was on paper, or it was in books, or it was on an old system that the county was getting off of. And to have a vendor come up and say, hey, by the way, we'll develop this for you so we can peddle it to other counties. It's just an amazing amount of efficiency gains in that area. You can go on to your next.
Absolutely. If we look at another, I think, great success, if we look at slide number 15, called property tax payment posting, Creditron is a system that was implemented along with our Inova cash receipting. It really was kind of a happy accident. We weren't out looking for this. When we were doing our research for the Inova point of sale system, we made a visit to to Crow Wing County. And they had this Creditron system. So this Creditron property tax payment system scans the stub that you receive with your property tax bill, with your check, and it creates an upload file into the tax system. So years ago, we were hand posting all of these payments, and many of you probably in this room came into customer service, you signed up for a shift, and you came in and you spent a couple hours in the department, and you hand keyed all those payments in, which we very much appreciated. But now we, for the most part, have the ability to run those through this high-speed payment system. It's amazing the amount of time that's been saved. If you look at the slide, pre-Creditron, It was about 360 hours spent per tax cycle. So considering the two major tax cycles, May and October, it's down to about 100 hours for a tax cycle. So where we were hand posting payments for even up to weeks post property tax date, we can get that done in days. So for a system that cost us $7,000. So it's an absolutely amazing system. With some technology issues that we've had here recently, we don't have it up and running yet, and I cannot wait till it's back. So it's really been a great implementation for us. Accuracy is up. It's just a wonderful thing. To look at the other couple of slides that I would have, we would be looking at 16 and 17, looking at more customer service. We did decide when talking about investments in technology, there are bad investments in technology, right? There are. We all know that things fail. If you've heard the word MNLARS in the past, and I'm sure that you have, that is the biggest technology failure I think I've ever seen. I don't think MNsure was a great technology investment either, from what I hear. But MNLARS was definitely a bad thing. So in July of 2017, the state of Minnesota authorized the go-live of this Minnesota licensing and registration system when it wasn't ready. It wasn't fully tested, it wasn't fully vetted, it was not ready to go live, but they were feeling the pressure. In regards to that, if you look at slide 17, there's a direct correlation between these two things. Pre-2017, our average wait time was about 8 minutes, with usually 20 minutes being our max. If you look at today, our average wait time is about 18 minutes, with a maximum of about 62. So about an hour wait time versus where we were in 2017 of 20. So our average wait time is about doubled, our maximum has about tripled. We have done quite a bit of research in looking at other locations. Our wait time is still fairly low when you look at some of the other locations out there. The Hennepin counties are big places. They're still, a lot bigger than we are. Even our neighbor to the other side of the river with their exam station, it can run up to 3 hours. So we've turned into this. I know I grew up near Chicago, and my parents had to go into the city to buy their tabs, and it was taking a day off work. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we're getting to be these days.
But Julie, just to clarify, that's not a system we purchased. That was a system that was kind of thrust upon us, correct?
It was
Okay.
thrust upon us. Absolutely. We had no choice.
But it is still a cost. So
Right.
instead of us, whether we have, we all have technologies that we use that the state has implemented, and some of those are maybe good decisions and some of those are poor decisions. And even after the MNLARS debacle, the driver's license came out and they chose not to go down the same path, but when you look at page 16, it wasn't like there was a huge lesson learned there either. Because we implemented Real ID and enhanced IDs at that given point, which is something that we had to go to as a state of Minnesota. For you to get on a plane, you need a different driver's license unless you're going to be carrying a passport. But they went to another vendor, but the rules in Minnesota, there's nothing that's ever simple here, right? We have to do things over the top. The federal rules say you have to do this. Minnesota says, absolutely, we're going to do this, and we're really going to make sure that there isn't any type of identity theft, or we're going to make sure you are who you say you are, so we're going to add these additional steps that you have to go through. And when our folks come here, I will tell you that those folks that come in for a Real ID and enhanced ID, what percentage of them, Julie, get sent away at least once, if not twice? It's a huge number. So you're looking at the cost to our citizens to have to come here, the cost to us to have to continue to process the same transaction over and over again, to have it fail because they forgot something is money on the books that you're not going to see. So,
Okay. All right.
So included, as we move forward, I want to talk a little bit about the City View project, which is on pages 19 and 20. Jamie, of course, is in the thrux of testing the next rollout of City View to have online permitting for permits that are not considered over-the-counter. Over-the-counter permits are ones that don't need a plan review. It's a windows, re-roofing, those types of things, mechanical permits, something that our inspectors don't need to take a look at. We rolled out the over-the-counter permits on the online portal in 18, and as you can see on page 19, the amount of people who've taken advantage of that, not having to come in, they apply online and they get issued online. They pay online, they don't ever have to walk in this door, and that number has it's an amazing amount of people that take advantage of this. And why not? We know that we want people to be able to do things anywhere at any given point. And when you look at 20, we'll say, well, how does that equate into staff hours, and what does it take to process an over-the-counter permit if they come in here versus if they do it online? And we do look at the number of permits on page 20, 860 permits that took less than 29 hours versus 324 permits that took a little under 47 hours. So an amazing amount of permits for a lot less time. So you see the efficiency adds there. Now, I will say, is our online permitting system, is it wonderful for everybody? And I think for our citizens, it's great. I think our communication back to our local townships, again, we only do permitting for the townships, not the cities. They all have their own permitting departments. But, we need to communicate better, or maybe those permits that they want to have some level of authority over, we consider that as we're rolling out our next phase. So hopefully as we continue to mature this product, we're going to get better and everybody will equally love it. But it is a huge savings in time and money for the stuff that we process. The last one that we want to talk about is on page 25, and that has to do with our implementation of e-poll books that we just did for the 2018 elections. So during an election period, post-election, we have an enormous amount of data that needs to be updated. For every person that goes in and votes, we need to update their history. For every person who goes in and registers on election day, we need to update their election record. The amount of time that took us in the past was we would be processing those until generally January after a November election. There is a certain time frame that it has to be done by the state, but we always have asked for a variance so that we could have an additional 30 to 60 days to get that done. So just because of the quantities. When you look at page 25, you're going to see how many hours did we spend in 2016 and how many hours did we spend in 2018. 1,012 hours down to 24 hours because those files are updated electronically. And there is some, cleanup work that we have to do after the fact. We still have some paper applications, of course, that we have to enter that come in with our absentee applications, that you can't use e-poll books for absentee at this point. So there are some, but for the most part, it's an enormous amount of savings. Not only that, but the accuracy of the information from our voters. One of the biggest bang for the bucks for these voters is they can scan their driver's license if they so choose to bring all that information automatically into this e-poll book, into the registration. What we were seeing in the past is we would get an application, it was incomplete, it was illegible, and so either way we still have to enter it because it has to have some type of a record that ties to the number of voters. And when somebody registers on election day, that counts as their voting history as well. So if it's a person that, they forgot a digit in their driver's license or we can't really read their name, we're entering the best we can, and most likely it could have errors in it. So this system has really minimized the amount of errors. We can validate identity much better, and we can process these very, very efficiently. Huge time savings for us, huge benefit for our customers.
Thank you. Troy. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you guys have questions? Do you want to add? Sorry.
I'm just kind of curious, Julie. I mean, I read and I've certainly heard there's going to be a replacement for MinLars, but I understand that doesn't really impact the work you have to do through Real ID and Enhanced ID. So best case scenario, how do you see that potential new system affecting wait lines and that kind of thing?
I have a two-pronged answer for that. For MinLars, the new system will not reduce the amount of work that we need to do at the counter, but we are hopeful that it will be more streamlined. They are taking more local office input. We have 5 full-time deputy registrars that are working on the project in St. Paul. So I know that we're being well represented, as well as we have 2 people in our offices that are serving on work groups for driver's license and motor vehicles. So they're getting that input. I have no doubt it will be more streamlined. I'm hopeful that things will at least go more quickly at the counter as far as the new VTRIS, they call it, Vehicle Title and Registration System, when that is implemented. Hopefully things will at least go a little bit quicker and more streamlined than they are today. I was at a meeting at the legislature last Monday and I heard 2 words that made me more happy than I could tell you. It was MinLars decommissioning. And wait, we're going to have a MinLars funeral party, I think, in customer service when that happens. But the other prong of that is, like Cindy referred to, the requirements for real and enhanced. We are taking a look at that legislatively to see what maybe we could do to make things more streamlined for our customers, both for them as well as the data entry at the counter. So I think it will impact wait times. It won't be huge. The new reality is just that the work has shifted. 60 to 80% of the work that was done at the state level before is now done at the local deputy registrar offices. So.
Will it be any easier when, I mean, it's a unique time right now where the masses are moving towards the Real ID and stuff.
Sure.
Will the renewal process and will that get better? I mean, I know that's many years out, but.
It will. I think that you're right. It is a big time right now with everyone trying to figure. The biggest thing right now is figuring out what you need. What type do you need? What do you need to get it? Those kinds of things. That will level off a little bit for sure. Once you have your Real ID or your Enhanced ID, when you come time for renewal, you don't need anything extra unless you're changing your address. So it will become a little more streamlined in the future for sure.
Okay, good. Just a side note, your staff did a great job. I recently redid my driver's license and I stopped there at that little station. They told me what I need, came in a couple days later. Didn't take me 5 minutes probably, so they did an awesome job.
Thank you. We've tried to balance what is it, having a staff member there full-time at that greeter station versus having them behind the window. We've seen a huge, I don't want to say improvement, but an impact from having that there. These visits that people keep making, unfortunately, it can be 3 visits to get your driver's license documents all together. But to keep them stopped at the greeter station, I would, as a customer, rather be turned away when I walk in than turned away after I wait in line for 45 minutes. So it saved a great deal of frustration. It is definitely well worth the effort.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Thank you.
You guys good? Adam, I skipped over you, sorry. Okay. So there's 2 slides, one about dispatch on page 24, and one about LETG on page 26. I'm wondering if you can just give us a kind of a high level of the efficiencies that you have seen through those systems and how it's impacted your work.
Sure. I'll start with the LTG. We transitioned to LTG as our public safety information system in 2016 from New World system, which the version we were using was going to no longer be supported. Although there has been challenges with the system, it has brought a lot of efficiencies. One example is the integrations. LTG, we have 21 integrations versus 9 integrations that we had in New World. What that allows us to do, a couple of good examples is e-charging and accident exchange. So as the deputies are in their squads, the information that's been inputted by dispatch or information they've inputted in the system is automatically flowing into these forms that in past, we would have to basically log into a different system to enter all that info. So that's increased our efficiencies there. Another good example is we've been able to give limited access to some of our partner agencies or organizations like the county attorney's office and community corrections, which allows them to go into the system and search for either their people on probation or seek information for court cases that are coming up, whereas in the past they would call to our office and someone would go find that information and send it to them. Now they have that ability to just go in there and find it themselves. With New World, the version we were using was having several issues, which created some downtime. LETG's total unplanned downtime since 2016 is 760 minutes, which equates to about 0.04% of the time that it's been operating. Information sharing is another huge area of efficiency. With our old system, as a deputy, I couldn't look at a police report in Jordan without contacting Jordan Police Department and having them send it to me. Now I have the ability to go in and look through their records management system at maybe an incident involving someone that I'm interested in or investigating. There's a lot less data entry than there was in the old system, which has saved a lot of time on our record staff. When a call comes into dispatch, the record is created and that record flows through every facet of the program so that there isn't duplicative entry that there was in the past, which minimizes certainly mistakes and things getting overlooked. We also now have the ability to create our own mobile forms. So a good example is a tow sheet. When we tow a vehicle, a sheet's printed out for that vehicle owner, and then a sheet's given to the towing company. In the past, that was a handwritten form. Now all that information, it just flows right into that form that we were able to create and customize for our need. And each agency that's a part of the system has that ability to create their own forms. And then custom attributes is another area which has been beneficial for us. If there's specific information that we want to track or data we want to collect, we're able to add a custom attribute and the inputting person can check a box, which then later we can go back and search that box and find all the data. So those would be some of them.
Nice.
As far as the dispatch, obviously the accuracy of our data in GIS and for our dispatchers is critical. The accuracy has gone up quite a bit, and I think we're in a better place for that. GIS probably has done the lion's share of the work involved with this, but as everybody can imagine, the more accurate information our dispatchers have allows them to quickly dispatch the resources necessary and provide them an accurate location, whereas in the past it may have been a little more vague, and we would have to do some driving around trying to find certain things.
All right, folks. I have a question.
Yes.
One thing, go back to LATG for a moment and speak a little bit more about the challenges that you're currently encountering, particularly on 64 unanswered requests seems to be quite a barrier to some of that implementation and complete lack of enhancements or upgrades.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, what are your plans going forward, and have you learned anything during the process of acquiring that software that you can use moving forward in any other kind of implementation?
Yeah, I would call LETG almost the perfect storm. So prior to our implementation, the company was sold to Zerker Technologies, who in my opinion, wasn't as familiar with the LTG platform as we would have liked to seen. And then Zerker was then sold to another company called Central Square. So we're on our, I think, third parent company to this program. Recently, we've been told that LTG was not chosen as a go-forward product for Central Square, and that they have limited the resources they're putting towards development. They've also reallocated their staff to focus on other areas of priorities for the company, which left us kind of in a precarious situation there. They have assured us that the system will be functional until the last agency moves off of it to something else. However, they are not looking to expand or enhance the program at this point. After finding that out, we have submitted a project, a CIP project, to either upgrade to one of their other products or try to find a new system. And we've been working with the CIP governance committee to get a good timeline for that. But it's important to know, I mean, there's 200 and roughly 10 agencies in the state of Minnesota on LTG. So it isn't, in my opinion, it isn't like they will just stop altogether. It will be a migration for some agencies. For others, they may hold out as long as they can. That's something that we as a sheriff's office and along with county administration will try to plan for and move through. Ways to avoid it in the future, you know, honestly, I think when we moved towards LTG, nobody had any indication that they were gonna sell. But I don't know how to prevent that other than the company that has purchased them, you know, has several different products that serve this purpose depending on the size of agency we have. So they are fairly stable. They've been around a long time. But you know, it'll be an interesting process moving forward.
Thank you.
Other panel questions?
Yeah, and I apologize again. I don't know if you will experience this as a softball question or as a more of a curveball.
I like softball.
So we as the county invest, I think, a lot of resources in this area. So the overall heading is investments in technology. And I think staff in the room would probably express gratitude and be able to articulate how it benefits us to have folks like Jeff and Connie and our business relationship managers. For some of us, like me, forcing us to think about process improvement. How can we make what we do a little bit more efficient, a little bit better? But when we talk about the data that's here and we talk about our systems, I think it gets pretty technical for your average staff person, let alone your average citizen who might be paying attention to this. So the question I have would be, how do you very concisely, or as concisely as you can, distill this down so that, you know, I think our citizens would say we talk a lot about efficiency, but my taxes I don't see my taxes going down. If I'm not using those programs or those services, I may not be personally reaping any of the benefits of these process improvements. My outcomes might not be improving if I am receiving services from the county. So what is the message back to the public overall, that this is really worth all the effort we put into this area? And I'm glad I get to be sitting here and saying that to you and not having to respond to that. But I think, to me, that's always what we have to get back to in some of these conversations, is ultimately what does this mean for the people we're trying to serve?
And Jake, I think that you hit it right on the head when I spoke earlier, and I said, you know, when we come to the board and we go to governance and we say, this is why we need this technology, it's because this is what we're looking to gain from the effort. And in many cases, it may not be, hey, the situation that occurred in land records where we got rid of half their staff. It may be, we have so much growth in an area like Carrie's that this is the only way that we can keep up without asking for 3 new staff every year. And, you know, and I'm a little talking out of school here, because like I know a whole lot about human services, but I think in all of these areas where you're looking at a lot of growth in the county, just our population growth, how do we manage all this growth with limited resources? Do we invest in technology to mitigate need for staff? And I'm not gonna say it's gonna totally take away the need for staff, because we know that in our proposed budget, we have requests for additional staff as well. But those staffing requests could be, you know, maybe 1.5 times what they were. And we still didn't approve all the staff that was requested. So how do we use technology to kind of bridge the gap? That's from my perspective, and I'll let everybody else who's smarter than me talk about what they think.
I would say for income maintenance, you know, we are serving some of our most low-income vulnerable citizens within some of our programs, and my response would be, we're able to do it more quickly now. So we are able to take your application, process it faster, get you the benefits that you need to meet your basic needs for you, yourself, or you and your children. So I think that alone makes a big difference.
And I was just going to throw out there, I think we don't do as good a job as we could in kind of coaching and communicating what's in it for you, the citizens. But I know certainly listening to Adam talk about the 911 and the GIS database, I hope that when I call with having a heart attack in my house, that I'm the 0% error rate, that they know where I am. And, you know, what GIS has done in this, I think, has dropped it, what did it say, from 10% down to 5%. I think we can, and that's part of what we do. What I'm trying to do as a business relationship manager is talk through with you. You know your business so well and what the improvement can do for you, but what can it do if you bring yourself up to 10,000 feet or higher and say, what does this really mean to the citizens? So I hope we'll get to that.
I would like to comment on that as well. Just a historical perspective, so I've been here 20 years. The difference in I want to say investments in technology, the way that the county looks at it is so very different than when we did it 20 years ago. It really was more of a departmental, what's in it for me, what's in it for my staff, and along with governance and other things that have been established throughout the county, it really is a more holistic view. You know, yes, you need this, but could someone else benefit from this as well? So it's not making just one-off stabs at technology, it's looking at, can we utilize this in other areas? And I think it's just smarter than we used to be. So I hope that anybody listening knows that we're looking out for you guys too, so.
I think too, from a transit perspective, I mean, if you look at the population continuing to grow, we're able to manipulate a lot more trips and serve the customers a lot better in terms of how we serve them and how we communicate with the customers. If we didn't have that ability to do that with the current software that we purchased, it gets a lot more convoluted with providing those trips and getting less denials, which is our goal, to try and provide service for everybody. And as the population continues to increase, especially the senior population and the vulnerable adults, our ridership keeps inclining, so.
Troy, did you want to you sent 4 slides in for this presentation. Do you want to give us kind of the high level
Sure.
efficiencies gained in your area?
Sure. It's difficult to talk about the efficiencies with one slide, but I'm representing 3 different softwares. One of them is the transit software, which was Novus. And that software is replacing a software that we had from the early 80s, the Trapeze software. And that software has provided us a lot of efficiencies in terms of how we communicate with the customers. It takes care of our volunteer drivers. It allows us to be the broker of trips and use that software to communicate with other vendors and providers electronically versus on paper. In addition to that, we've saved, I think, 1 FTE. We actually eliminated 1 FTE from transit due to the efficiencies from that software. And so those are some of the efficiencies with the software for transit. Also, medical assistance. We've been able to save the county a significant dollar amount. Let me get my slide out here.
page 11, right?
Page 11, yeah. So you can see from this slide, it basically represents our on-time performance for our medical assistance trips from 2015 through 2018. You can see the increase in the on-time performance, so the customers getting to their appointments on time. And that has a lot to do with the way that the trips get scheduled and how they get booked, and the amount of paperwork involved, and the amount of drivers involved to get that job done. So you can see the efficiencies, and this is just one slide that really kind of, it's a small representation of what the software can do for us. We're continuing to implement the software, so some of the stuff that we're doing is it's allowing the volunteer drivers, so currently with the volunteer driver program, they have to contact us to get the trips, and now we can set the trips out there, let them take what they want to take, and they're very, it's just, the communication is much better from that perspective. And then also for how we book the medical assistance trips. The number of trips that we're able to do and the efficiencies of doing that has been very, very helpful. We did everything manually by paper to bill the vendors. So the vendors, the way it works is that we assign the vendor to a trip, a medical assistance trip, and we would typically do that by paper. And so it was paper going back and forth. Now it's all automated so that the vendor can come in and see, and they can pick more trips. They can be more efficient based on the software technologies as well, just from the Novus program. The second software I'd like to talk about is AssetWorks, which is our fleet maintenance software. And I think that's representing on, let's see here.
Page 7.
Page 7. So I want to talk a little bit about AssetWorks. AssetWorks was, originally our software was from the 80s, our maintenance software that takes care of all the maintenance on the vehicles. We spend $1 million a year in capital. And the idea is that we want to take care of that capital and make sure that it lasts as long as it can, and we are as efficient as we can be with the maintenance on that equipment. And when we looked at replacing our software a few years ago, we realized that the software that we wanted was quite expensive. And in order to get a sophisticated software, we thought it would be best to share that resource with other vendors, with other cities and townships. And so as part of a scale initiative, we went ahead and set the software up so that we could share it with other agencies, either scale members or government agencies. And in doing that, we now share that software with 7 different agencies. So we have the City of Shakopee, we have Scott County Watershed District, the Carver County is sharing the software with us. Currently Apple Valley and Egan and some of those representatives are here today, just in case we had questions for them, but Apple Valley and Egan are also sharing that software with us. The Minnewacan Sioux community is looking at sharing that software with us. So it's been a really, really good way to have efficiencies in software and share those costs accordingly. So it's been really good that way. The preventative maintenance is something that, indicates something that when you're taking good care of a fleet, you want to make sure that the maintenance is done on time. And we had a difficult time of doing that. There's so many efficiencies that come with the software. But this is the result of a community indicator that, our maintenance compliance has been improved and our preventative maintenance compliance has been improved over the years. And so you can see that from that graph from year to year. But we do so many different things with the software. It's prevented us, it's helped us with the parts inventory. It's all automated. It used to be all on paper. So you can imagine we have a couple $100,000 worth of inventory and parts that we distribute and do that very efficiently today, where we couldn't do that in the past. We get our maintenance done on time. Part of the problem that we had with maintenance was the communication. So we have sheriff's vehicles, for example, that are out there 24 hours a day. To get them in and get the service done when they need to get done and get it done on time, especially at this high rate of speed sometimes that they drive. We want to make sure that those vehicles are safe. In order to do that, we have to make sure that that maintenance is kept up. That's been a huge issue for us, and now the software allows them to schedule their own maintenance at their convenience when their vehicles are available, so that it's been able to help that, and that's really what increased our preventative maintenance from that perspective. And then the third software is on our motor pool. So a while back, a couple of years back, we looked at what we were spending in mileage reimbursement. And we felt that we could do a better job of providing that service by buying vehicles versus paying out the mileage rate. At the time that we started, we were doing about 459,000 miles in mileage reimbursement at whatever the state raised at that time. And from the very first year that we purchased the software, we purchased, I think, 15 or 16 vehicles. And the very first year, we gained 100,000 miles of not paying out. So between the software costs and the purchase of the vehicles and the mileage reimbursement and the number of miles we were paying out, we gained about 100,000 miles worth of mileage that we didn't have to pay out the very first year. And there's been a variety of different things that happened throughout that graph. If you look at the graph, there's been a variety of different things that happened, but our efficiencies are gaining. But there was a couple of years where we had vehicles that were out on they had recalls on them, so most of the fleet was down for a good period of time, and you could see where the mileage increased and the cost increased significantly during that period. I think that's.
Thanks. Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. On your medical assistance provider trips, can you tell me, if you know offhand, how many are denied in a year, and what is the typical reason for denials?
I don't know that we've ever had any, I don't think we can deny a medical assistance trip. If we have, it's been very, very, very minor, like maybe 1 or 2 a year, if at all.
Thank you.
Pardon?
Same day.
Yeah. Yeah. So same-day trips are not there. I mean, there's certain rules around medical assistance that we have to abide by. Same-day trips, we're not required to have the same efficiency as we would for planned medical assistance trips.
And then my other question is related to the total mileage reimbursement, and I see it's dropped considerably in 2018, looking more even from just 2016. And I'm wondering, how much do you think that could possibly be attributed to individuals not using the electronic version of mileage reimbursement, or waiting too long, so it's past the 90-day cutoff?
Well, we really don't have any idea of what people are thinking when they turn in their mileage. All I can tell you is that we saw the mileage drop from the very first year by over 100,000 miles. So that was an indication to me that either there was people changed the way that they did business, or they changed the way that they were submitting mileage. So before it was done on paper, and there was no way to really track even where the trips were going, other than a piece of paper that said I went from here to here and this was my mileage reimbursement. But now with the software, we know exactly where they're going. We know the times that they wanted to use the vehicles. We know what times where the gaps were. So we're able to look at all that data and try to make some determination about how we can get better at and more efficient at providing those services for them and the vehicles for them. And so I can't really tell you why people are, and if they are or not. I can just tell you that there were about 4,000 trips that were that we paid out in mileage reimbursement, and 3,300 of those were pre-approved by the supervisor before the passenger even, or the person even had to look for a vehicle. So that indicates to me that either, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing, because it could be that they decided, that the supervisor decided that those miles were probably more efficient in their own vehicle versus using a county vehicle. So we really can't tell you that, but I can tell you that the average trip length was over 25 miles a trip. So without knowing what the real reasons are and getting into the details of that, it might be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. We don't know. But I can tell you that it's much cheaper to use a motor pool vehicle than it is to pay out mileage in most cases.
So just to build on that, we as supervisors and managers and even we as staff members need to be cognizant about using our own vehicle. And as supervisors and managers, we need to be cognizant about why do we pre-approve those? Why do we let someone, should they be taking a motor pool vehicle, and at least or making the attempt to get a motor pool vehicle? Because we want to make sure that our capital is really being utilized to its fullest capacity as well. So in the future, one of the things that when Troy was bringing me some data, I said, gosh, why? I mean, if it's 25 miles is the average trip, I would still think a motor pool vehicle would be, warranted. However, maybe there wasn't one available. Maybe there were other existing circumstances. They were going from their home, which is half the distance to where they needed to be to begin with. We don't know all of the reasons why motor pool vehicles were not being requested, but that's a takeaway for all of us to, think about that when our staff are getting out on the street. Should they be taking a vehicle, at least are making the attempt. So just a takeaway.
Well, and the other thing that we, you can clearly see the definition of when the vehicles weren't available, so you can see them prior to when we purchased the vehicles, and then you can see them while we had them, and they went down because of the recall on the vehicles. You could see the mileage increase, and the cost was driven to the C1 during the time that we were down, so clearly it's a savings.
Do you track denials?
On,
Like if I go into the system and I get denied because there's no vehicle available, do you track
yes,
that?
we do. We have all of that data. We can tell you when the trip, the only thing that we can't see, and that is when it gets pre-approved. So the origin and destination is in the software, which, by the way, also added a bunch of efficiencies because that used to be all be done on paper. And so staff would go ahead and use their mileage, they'd fill out a piece of paper, they'd send the paper into the supervisor, it would get approved, and it would be a couple of weeks or 3 weeks before they got paid. In the new software, they're able to put that in right away and get it done. But to answer your question is, we do track the origin and destinations and the times that the vehicles were requested, and we know exactly how many denials we've had.
One real side question, Troy, on page 7 with the Asset Works, and obviously have done a great job in terms of doing that preventative maintenance and getting things done timely. I'm curious, you mentioned to prevent other repair costs. I'm just kind of curious, have you ever tried to quantify that? Do you have any data that shows that you've saved so much money on unplanned repairs and that kind of thing?
The only thing that we can do, because the only data that we have that we believe is accurate enough is because we had, in the old system, we couldn't transfer that data over, so we really don't know.
Okay.
So the only thing we have is what we have in the new system, and we are monitoring that.
Okay.
But we can't put I can't put a number to it
Okay.
yet, but I will, I think in a few years, I'll be able to do that. But I can tell you that, and I think anybody in fleet can tell you that if you don't do preventative maintenance, you probably know that with your own vehicle. If you don't take care of it, it's not gonna last. And so that's, but we haven't been able to quantify that.
Okay, we are coming up on our time. I'm going to give panel people, do you have any last system questions that you want to ask folks?
I have one question, and it may or may not be fair, but I'm just kind of curious from Jeff's perspective that the whole piece around software as a service and hosted solutions and that kind of thing. And I certainly understand the vision of where the county is going with all of that. I think my question is, have we done any kind of true kind of, since that's been our direction, kind of cost-benefit analysis? And I think where I come from, just seeing a couple of situations in HHS where we're moving towards hosted solutions, and I just think of the exorbitant amount of time that's gone into trying to make that happen, and delays, and some of those kind of things. Is this, especially in areas where we're so reliant on state systems and being able to connect then to state systems, we have such limited kind of options around case management systems and some of those kind of things. Is this truly been shown to be a cost benefit to the county?
So there's multiple questions in there, I think. First one is, have we done analysis on that cost benefit, that kind of stuff? To some degree, I think we have. I think you've seen in the discussions that all of the panel members have presented the benefits that they've realized from the various solutions, most of which are either hosted or software as a service. I'll use LTG as a really great example. One of the big benefits that we see there is, since it is a hosted solution, the sheriff's office is 24/7. They can't be down. So instead of being reliant on IT to keep that system up or to respond to something in the middle of the night, the vendor has to take care of that. They can staff that 24/7, whereas we really can't. So that's a huge benefit from both the county's perspective as well as IT's perspective. In terms of other types of applications that we've moved out to either software as a service and hosting, let me just clarify for everybody's benefit. The difference between those two solutions is hosting is just taking the application and putting it somewhere else. It could be in our data center, it could be in someone else's data center. It's still an application that's really dedicated to our use. Whereas software as a service is much more generic. It's software that typically you think of an Amazon. When you go shop on Amazon, it's a service that's used by everybody in the world. It's not customized to you. It's not specific to you. That's a software as a service. We don't have very many of those yet. Most of the solutions that we have are hosted solutions, hosted by either the vendor or someone that the vendor works with to host the software. Those are a lot of times a little more challenging because they are still custom systems. A lot of those systems do require integrations with other systems that we use, whether it's our ERP like Infor, whether it's our reporting systems, things like that. And that's where things I think a lot of times get really challenging is being able to, or even the state systems, being able to get information out of the state systems into Infor or into our reporting systems or into Inova or wherever other systems that we use to deal with that data. And that's, I think, sometimes that isn't always understood when the capital projects are started, is what those integration points are. I think we're starting to focus on that a little bit more now in the capital projects, making sure we're identifying interfaces up front so that we know and can really build in those costs and timelines to get those integrations done, because a lot of times the vendors really won't help us or can't help us there. They know their system. They don't know all these other systems that we want to talk to, so it's very difficult for them to build interfaces to those other systems. So those are, I think, still some lessons learned. I think the notes in the presentation speak to some of that as well, some of the challenges that we have had as we've done more hosting. That's still a space that's rapidly evolving. Some vendors are better at it than others. Some of them really understand what it takes to host an application. Other vendors were their first foray into that world, and that's where I think we see a lot of those delays and challenges, security issues, that kind of stuff, because they've never done it before either. And so now they're trying to take on all of that risk and all of that technology when we just build software, So that's kind of difficult for a lot of them to understand how do they take, and a lot of these are small companies, small organizations, like you pointed out, their core competency is building that application, not in running a data center or running a hosted model. So that's a challenge for us as well. And I think that's important for us to, when we look at those decisions, to take that into account. Is this vendor really capable of hosting the application, or is there a better alternative? So I think those are questions we need to continue to ask as we go forward.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say, and actually I really appreciate Pam's question, because PHDoc is a very good example of that. And I think what needs to be taken in consideration is the impact to the business by those delays, because we currently use an antiquated system, Carefax, that goes down about 3 times a week, which is a total work stoppage issue for my staff and a lot of frustration, and they haven't done any upgrades in probably about 3 years because they've chosen not to have that as a priority. So there's definitely some of those costs associated with that delay. I think we've ended up with, it's not a software as a service, but the hosted solution that we've come up with was a really good partnership, and is paving the way for Dakota to be able to host other solutions. We just happened to be the first one, so then there was the additional 1-year delay of implementation. But I think during that process, Public Health has built wonderful relationships with Connie in particular, and IT, and being able to have opportunities to at least get you acquainted with PHDoc and what it is. And it was a very interesting process that I hope we never have to do again, but there was a lot of learnings in that process.
Thank you. All right, quick questions from the audience. All right, in the interest of time, go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to make a comment on the. I was just going to make a comment on the 2 softwares that fleet is using. We've been able to right-size the fleet by downsizing by 2 vehicles in different departments. And we're actually looking at doing another vehicle now, and then which will offer more vehicles on the pool system for less paid out mileage reimbursement.
Oh, thanks for adding that. Thank you. All right, Madam Chair, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Colleagues, any questions or comments for this team? Commissioner Beer.
Thank you. I mean, we're talking technology, and that's automatically a love-hate relationship. Sometimes it's, hey, we really love this software, and there's one that I'm thinking of that we really hate. Exactly. And then there's those softwares that we love and hate, the same software. Cindy, you kind of kicked it off by saying, we've got a blueprint, we've got a roadmap for technologies we do for most of what we do at the county. And with technology, LTG is a perfect example of, they changed, kind of behind the scenes maybe, I wasn't here, we'll just leave it at that. Are we, and how do I want to ask this? Do we as an org, do we feel like we're leading or being led when we're making investments in anything, but we're talking about technology today? Like, do we feel like, I know some of the stuff's mandated, take this, it's good for you, take two, call me in the morning, we know that works, but are we as an org collectively smart enough, not intelligence-wise, but adept enough to like recognize some of these things and be nimble enough to go as the workflow changes and the technology changes? I mean, it's for everybody, but you just mentioned the roadmap and so that's why we're putting you on the spot. Not really, but.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Beer, I think it's a little of both. There are times.
You don't need to whitewash your answer, by the way, too. You can speak, not that, I'm telling you that, forget it, disregard it. Disregard it. For everyone else, no whitewashing necessary.
Yeah. No, I think that we do a little bit of both. And so, like the LTG was a little bit of they put in a request, but they put in the request, and I think even before Adam, you knew that they were even gonna, that the system was bought out and they're not gonna actually do any R&D to it.
Nope.
So research and development is key to the implementation and the continued support of that application. And we have had multiple, there are applications that are moving off, like our CAMA, right? It's an old AS400, we've had that since the 80s. It has to be moved off, it's not gonna be supported, and yet there are sometimes with the code, with our state laws, there's such a limit to what we can invest in. So sometimes we may, we choose because it's the only vendor in town, or it's the only vendor in town in the state of Minnesota. So we make those decisions. We made some decisions that probably weren't so popular. If we look to Vision, remember the Vision project, a company that was going to create a camera system for us. They were out of New York or out of the East Coast, had a lot of issues, and some were through this project. After we invested a substantial amount of dollars, we cut that cord and we moved on because we knew it was probably going to be a lot of continued investment of dollars without a real return on value. So we have to look toward, in each of these systems, do we continue to limp it along? Do we try to help support and enhance it? Do we talk to these vendors that are really, really good partners with us today and see, do they even have some ideas on how to make us better and how to make us smarter without having to buy into a new technology all the time? These technologies are expensive. They're not cheap investments. I'm not saying all of them, but many of them are big core groups, our taxes, and that's not a cheap app. Our LTG is not a cheap application. Infor, as we look to putting money away to do something different with that system. So we try to be, our technology roadmap says, you need to plan, but there are times where we don't know, and all of a sudden this vendor pulls the rug out. We do have an application or a spreadsheet that has total cost of ownership, and in that, it lists all the applications that we have and what we feel their longevity is. We are supposed to, and we haven't in this last year for sure, and Connie could probably talk smarter about this, but we haven't done a good job of looking back to that and saying which ones are at end of life. Most of the departments know to be putting them in, but maybe we say, hey, this one's coming up in about 4 years. Are we going to reinvest in the same technology and see how much R&D they're going to put into it? Or are we going to look for an alternative solution? So those are the things that we need to do on both, but I think the answer is both. We can lead, but we can also follow. Someone else who had a lot of success stories, which is why we all belong to our professional organizations, because we listen to our peers and we network with them, and then when there's something really works well for them, we like to ride on their coattails a little bit.
And just to follow up, you also mentioned that, starting out that, we want to be asking the right questions and looking at all these things. And Pam, so that was kind of the bookend question, like, hey, are we asking these questions? Like, is this software as a service working? I know our server room, the room's staying the same size, but there's more and more space. So that removes my heartburn. That we're willing to ask hard questions and bold questions, like, is this working? Is this the best way? And technology changes on both sides. Like I said, our workflow, and then companies change, right? Because they're coming up and buying others and changing and moving on themselves, which we have no clue about. So that's helpful to know. One other question on the I don't remember what page it was. One of the first questions: what are we not doing well? Bullets. Which, you know what? This is one of the longer lists. I see that as a strength. Like, hey, this is kind of some of the things that aren't going well. I don't see that, a shorter list is a good thing. I think a longer list isn't always a bad thing because it gives us something to look at. But the one bullet I wanted to look at, it said something, I probably should have had it up here. It says, maybe not always able to deal with some of our contractors and enforce some accountability. And so that kind of bubbled up my heartburn on, one of our long-term, I think it was a year or two, I'm looking at Danny in the back there, we did I think a 5-year invest on a solution. Like, accountability is part of everything. So what do we need to do there to improve that that there's an accountability for what it is and this is to everybody, I know I'm kind of looking at you, but that's a big part of what we do. I'm not saying Gestapo, but if we're spending money, there ought to be some level of accountability, reasonable accountability for what it is for every dollar we spend. In this case, we're talking about technology. So how do we improve that particular issue with people that we're spending a ton of time, talent, and treasure with?
I think Leslie wants to respond to that one.
Cindy and I know we've had this discussion multiple times with Jen Schultz and Danny and at governance. I think part of it's the maturity of the industry, Commissioner. It is really hard. We put in a couple contracts that if they didn't deliver at a certain time, there would be a fiscal penalty. Most of them object to those types of things. It's typically standard, like if you look at a highway contract or a building contract or those types of things. So far, the industry hasn't matured to that level. They don't appear to have specifications and standards that are following. They're still negotiated individually. You talked about being a leader or being responsive. I take a look at, and I would agree with Cindy, in some we've been a leader. If you look at Troy, he is fulfilling Gary's image and that vision of shared services, and why can't all 7 counties be on certain things, or cities that have those same things? Why does everybody have to have an individual one? And so we have looked, we have tried to negotiate some types of liquidated damages or things into our contracts. They don't appear to be mature enough at this point to be able to do it because there aren't necessarily a set of standards and specs that are followed. That has been quite a struggle, but I think we have, and I think Luke, the sheriff, and Adam did a really good job at trying to hold LTG accountable, at least to deliver what was in the contract. Jeff was involved with some of those conversations. I was early. We still are missing a couple things, I think, from the original contract that were maybe not clear enough. But I also think we've gotten better at writing what we want from those contracts than 4 or 5 years ago as well, and what are the outcomes that we're looking for as we move towards, hosted and managed services and software as a service. So I think part of it's just the maturity of where we are in that process. And I think Jen Schultz has done a really good job of trying to work with IT and the businesses. I think the whole security issue with hosting and caseworks that IT has identified and Jen identified right away. Is it secure enough? Is that where we want to be? And so I think they are asking those questions and taking a look at it.
That's good. And just one point of clarification too. The question I asked about, are we leading or being led? The ideal answer is both. It is both. So if someone's doing something better and has a better, I don't know why I'm just looking at you, Cindy, but I'll look at Chris. If somebody else is doing it better, that we're willing to say, you know what, that's working. We're going to beg, borrow, and steal to use that. That's a good thing to me. I don't. So I just want to be clear. And if you ever, I'm looking at all of our staff, if you're ever unclear, like, what was that guy trying to say? Like, come ask me. What did you mean when you said this? Because it's a positive, it's never meant to be a negative, just being willing to ask the question. So I just want to be clear on that perspective.
And I think WCI is a good example. We maybe didn't hit everything perfect in some of the security, but they developed a software that's efficient. And then when they saw we had a need, they then went and built a software based on that model that we tested and helped drive that they can now sell as a product at a good rate to other counties. There is no reason other counties can't use that same system or be part of that same network that we're on. And I think right there was some leadership out of the county to help do that. I think Lisa hit the one with Dakota County. It took a while to get there because it was the first time through it, but that could lead to more positive partnerships between the two of us who are blurred by a freeway. I mean, that's all that really differentiates us. And so to be able to work through those things and get there, I think is a positive first step.
Agreed.
Commissioner Albrecht.
MBTA got burned on a contract, technology contract, and with a vendor, and then they had to kind of redo it with another vendor, and then what they did is they created about 8 different measurables or stopping points where to get paid you had to achieve this and this and this and this, and there were about 8 of them. So if you want to just have a contract to look at and how they did it, it might offer some insight, but so that's something good that they're now doing with their contracts, technology contracts.
All right. Thank you to the team. Even this board in the last 3 years has invested a lot in technologies, and we need to hear that they are creating efficiencies, that they are successful. We need to hear that as we look to the future. I too was heartened by the longer list of what else do we need to work on, because that to me is the purpose of these presentations. That's the purpose of all this work that you all put into this, is what can we improve and get better. So thank you for that. Thank you for condensing a very broad and a very technical topic down to things that really matter for policy decision making. I know that you're all experts in your field, and there's so much more you could say about it. You too, Cindy, you're an expert.
Shoot from the hip.
All right, so thank you very much. We are going to recess for 5 minutes while we reconfigure the room and get our additional guests in here. So we'll recess for 5 minutes. 19 meeting of the Scott County Board of Commissioners. We're moving on to our consent agenda. These are items that have been previously workshopped, discussed by our advisory committees, and unless pulled from the consent agenda, will pass as one motion. 7.1, to approve the request for a conditional use permit to construct a private indoor horse riding arena. Daniel and Wendy Bungert, applicants and property owners, in Section 17 of Newmarket Township. Item 7.2, to approve the request for an interim use permit to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit. Bruce and Jody Bartusik, applicants and property owners, in Section 35 of Cedar Lake Township. Item 7.3, to approve a new on-sale liquor license for Seavers Corn Maze LP, doing business as Seavers Farm in Louisville Township. Item 7.4, to adopt resolution number 2019-137, authorizing entering into an agreement with the Shakopee, Midwakanton Sioux community regarding the County Highway 42 reconstruction project. Item 7.5, to adopt resolution number 2019-138, approving the findings of fact and conclusions for the CP 42-19 environmental assessment worksheet and negative declaration on the need for an environmental impact statement. Item 7.6, to approve the Minnesota Family Investment Program biennial service agreement for 2020 through 2021. Item 7.7, to adopt resolution number 2019-131, authorizing entering into an agreement with Clean Tech Services Corporation for custodial services for Scott County facilities. Item 7.8, to adopt resolution number 2019-136, approving annual agreements with Kimley Horn and Associates Incorporated, SRF Consulting Incorporated, and WSB and Associates Incorporated for professional transit consulting services. 7.9, to adopt resolution number 2019-139, amending the 2019 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program for the CP 17-42 Pedestrian Bridge and Trail Project to initiate design in 2019. 7.10, to approve the development agreement between River Valley Partners LLP and Scott County and adopt resolution number 2019-140, setting an annual assessment for tax parcel ID number 079330111 in the amount of $15,000 for the tax years 2020 through 2024. 7.11, to approve record of disbursements and approved claims. And 7.12, to approve payroll processing of personnel actions. These are the 12 items on our consent agenda. Do any need to be pulled for further discussion?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I
Or do
will
you?
second, but I would like to pull
Oh, I'm sorry.
7.8 for a separate vote. That's fine. Yeah, no,
Okay.
that
Move
was-
approval with the exception of 7.
And I'll second, but I will 7.8 for a separate vote.
A little quick, sorry.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 7.8, which we will discuss after this item. Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, I'm not going to pull anything. I just want a brief comment on 7.10 and tip my hat to staff for finding a way to get to yes and working with the applicant to actually participate in the assessment in a way that doesn't ding their business cash flow too much, but still keeps the taxpayers whole. Way to go. Thanks for doing that.
Great, thank you. Any further comments or items that need to be pulled for further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 7.8, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Let's move on to item 7.8. Do we have, I know Lisa was here,
No.
or do you just have a comment?
No. My son works there and I want to.
You want to abstain for a separate vote? All right. So any comments or needed discussion on item 7.8 from anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we adopt resolution 2019-136 and urge its adoption.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution number 2019-136. Any further discussion on this matter?
Madam Chair, just by way of explanation, as I understand it, this is an authorization to continue to do work that falls underneath the bidding requirements of state procurement law. This is pretty routine. We've worked with these people for years. They know our business. They've done good work for us. And so I just want to say that it's routine stuff. Understanding Commissioner Wolf's situation, I'd encourage the other three commissioners to support the resolution.
And I just would say, Madam Chair, I just talked to the attorney, she's just abstain, it doesn't hurt anything, it just,
Right.
and they do great work, all of them, so, yep.
Wonderful, thank you for that, thank you, and thank you for your comments, Commissioner Beard. Any further discussion on this matter? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Any absent?
Abstain.
Thank you. Motion carried. I don't know how to say that word. All right, let's move on to item 8.1, to adopt resolution number 2019-133, approving the 2020 budget in the amount of I can't even say these numbers either. They're pretty big. $13,280,984 and payable tax levy in the amount of $3,452,685,000 of the Scott County Community Development Agency and certifying same to the county auditor. We have a lot of our good friends and partners here from the CDA, and we're excited to hear from them. Good morning, Mr. Jaffa.
I usually need some help when it comes to the technology department, so if you would bear with me. We have, I guess my opening remarks are, I just want to, can you hear me all right? Yep. Okay. I just want to thank the county board for their continued participation as a strong partner and a leader, and your administrative staff in the many projects that are going on that involve the CDA. What you're about to see in our presentation this morning is kind of a combination of a lot of the many programs the CDA is involved in. Of course, the watershed moment, one of them took place the other day. The Earths facility is finally underway, and clearly now we're moving on to Brentwood 2, among other developments throughout the county. Clearly, these things would not be possible without real partnerships and real commitment. So what we want to do is to show you a PowerPoint that actually is the byproduct of a branding effort, which you will hear more about as we begin to move through. I've got members of my senior staff here this morning, and you're familiar with them, and they will be taking part in this presentation as they are the ones that own a lot of the information that's contained therein. We invest in possibilities to live and work in Scott County. And the vision is to pursue those opportunities for economic growth, develop pathways for residents to have affordable homes, and cooperate with communities to design achievable goals that support all people's lives. You'll notice that branding means that we're flying under a little different color scheme than we have in the past, but we think it really fits the mode for us. Our values are collaboration, inventive, equitable, and attentive. We're pursuing opportunities for economic growth, and we're developing pathways for residents to have affordable homes and to cooperate with communities to design achievable goals that support all people's lives. And pursuing these opportunities are the programming efforts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Julie Siegert up, our housing director, and she's going to take this part of the presentation. And I might add too, if you could maybe hold your questions to the end, and then we'll take those, as I'm sure you'll have some. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and good morning, commissioners. Gotta catch up here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about with pursuing opportunities is the workforce housing developments. I provided you with some information as a handout there. So when we talk about workforce housing, these are really developments that are serving households who are earning $60,000 per year for a family of 4. When the Maxfield study was completed back in 2016, we had 513 of those units. Since that time, we have been making significant progress in increasing the supply of workforce units. We have added 287 units, and we currently have 180 additional units in the pipeline. So the demand from the study showed that we needed to add 626 workforce housing units between 2017 and 2015. So if you do the math on that quickly, we are 159 units from reaching that initial goal that was set out for us the end of 2016. Tomorrow, you're invited to celebrate the newest opening, which is Sarah's and Flats right here in Shakopee. It's over by Target at 10:30. It'd be great to see you there. It's another development by MWF Properties. Not really on your handout that I gave you, but I just wanted to highlight in our rural communities, so far their applications are not quite as successful in the tax credit round. But they have been stepping up and using tools in their toolbox and have been using TIF assistance. So in the city of Jordan, they have developed 28 townhomes. 20% of those units are at 50% of area median income, which for a family of 4 is $50,000. So there's 5 additional workforce units in Jordan. Similarly, in Belle Plaine, they have also granted TIF assistance to that same developer, and they will be doing over 2 phases, 72 units. Again, 20% of those will be at 50% of area median income. The next thing I wanted to highlight is that the CDA has an opportunity to sponsor different education scholarships through our industry partners. And in the last couple of years, the CDA has stepped up by providing, in addition to those sponsorships, 3 $1,000 scholarships to households who are pursuing education. We serve about 750 households in our rental assistance program, and about 10% of those have a high school senior in them. So they have an ability to apply for these scholarships. One such individual, his name is Osmond, he received a $1,000 scholarship from the CDA, a $1,000 scholarship from Minnesota NARO, which is one of those local industry partners, and then was awarded a national scholarship, which we're really proud of, a first for our agency. He was awarded $8,850. So he is heading to the University of Minnesota, studying computer science, and we just want to celebrate him as he's pursuing opportunities as well. And then finally, the Community Land Trust. You had a board workshop on that recently, so not really a lot to highlight there other than the CDA is working on developing that program and hopes to have our first home buyer in place either the end of the year or the first of next year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Good morning. We're going to tag team this a little bit, so you'll see us bounce back and forth as we go through a few of these slides. But one other opportunity that we've been working on pursuing is Technology Village, and how do we look at expanding that business incubator program throughout the county. Over the past couple years, we've really been integrated into the program. Joe Faust, who works with me, has taken over essentially all of the scheduling, working with keeping the spaces leased. And we've been actively involved through the Live, Learn, Earn process and with the city of Shakopee in what they are currently looking at as far as their innovation center. So our biggest question is, how does this expansion fit into potentially that program? And as we work with them on that, we continue to kind of keep our eyes and ears open, hear kind of what those opportunities are. As we go through that process and they go through that process of having that feasibility study completed, I think we'll come out of that with a better idea of kind of where this incubator piece fits, whether it's within that facility or potentially something that we might continue to pursue on our own if it by chance doesn't fit, because we have certainly heard that there is a need from the business community and the entrepreneurial community to make something like that happen. So as we look at economic growth, I'm going to go back just for 1 minute to highlight kind of what it is around economic growth that it is that we've decided to focus on. So really for us, economic growth is that intentional and proactive relationships that promote economic development and appeals to diverse businesses and organizations. So if we look at some of the programs that we've had in place, hopefully most of these are familiar to you as we've talked about them in the past. And we've really designed these around how do we affect the businesses at different levels throughout the county. So the first couple that are on that sheet really speak to those entrepreneurs and the small businesses. So we have our Open to Business program that helps with advisory services and some financial access. And the Fast Track Challenge, which really highlights our entrepreneurs that are in the area. How do we help them get a kickstart to launching their next business idea or their next product? And then the Economic Development Incentive Grants are partnerships with our communities. And we have put over $2.2 million back into communities so that they can do projects that are related to improving our economic development efforts throughout the county. With lead responses, those are also a partnership with our communities as we're constantly monitoring different leads that are coming in, helping to respond to those on behalf of all of our cities that are within the county. And really, we've implemented this system where we are monitoring those MNCAR leads particularly, which is through the Minnesota Commercial Association of Realtors, to see what opportunities are coming through that are really looking to highlight Scott County and want to come to Scott County, but that we are missing out on because we don't have the buildings available that are the right size or the land available that's ready to go. So one of the things that we're looking at in the coming year is to really go through an analysis of what are those missed opportunities and what can the CDA be doing to partner with our cities to better address what those opportunities are that we all want to have come to our communities. Economic gardening, which is now CEO Next, is something that Scott County has paid for in the past and the CDA has helped with the recruiting of. So we continue to help and target those second stage businesses that are a bit more established and tend to have anywhere from 10 to 100 employees and revenues of $1 million to $50 million. We're getting ready to kick off that next program year and are looking for businesses to join that program. And then the last thing that I really wanted to mention was this community resource website, which is a partnership that has come up through the Live, Learn, Earn initiative. We've had the privilege of being part of the workforce readiness group since the beginning on that particular initiative. And one of the action items that has come out of that, which I believe you've probably heard hopefully a lot about, is this idea of a community resource website, which will really help us as we are trying to come up with creative solutions to work towards our goal of having 50% of our residents live and work in the county by 2030. We've kind of plateaued where over the last 5 years, or the last 7 years, we've seen a 5% increase in that number. We're sitting at about 40% of our residents who are also working within the county. So we have our other 10% to go. We're down to 10 years left. What can we do in light of these low unemployment rates, the lack of labor, people in the labor force? What can we do to really connect the people who are living here with the jobs that we have here? So we have plenty of openings. So that led to this idea of this website is how do we get these jobs in front of the people who live here? Where can we potentially be sending people as a one-stop, go to this place and you'll find all the information that you need, not only about jobs that are here, but also about living here and getting around here and what you can do here. And that community piece is intended to really help be a value to the community to say, I'm looking for something to do. Where can I find something to do in any of our cities this weekend? Hopefully this website will be that resource. And when people are looking for jobs, whether it's every couple years or every 10 years, they'll already be familiar with the site through other means where they will be directed to those jobs that are here and help them to find a job that's close to home. So with that, I'll turn it back to Julie to talk about affordable homes.
All right, so on affordable homes, we are developing solutions and services that capitalize on the resources the CDA has access to that cultivates long-term success. So as Bill mentioned, we have a wide variety of programs that we do that with. The INVEST program is what we developed in the last year to respond to the increasing interest in developers coming to Scott County to build workforce housing units. So just for some context, this past year we received requests from 4 different developers totaling $1.25 million for a deferred loan from the CDA. Though we are supportive of all of these developments, we certainly don't have quite enough resources to go around. So we developed a competitive process and are using that program to award the applications. Our homeownership program, hopefully you caught the Scott County Scene article that was written in June. It featured our homeownership program that serves the first-time homebuyers club for people interested in purchasing a home in Scott County, as well as one-on-one counseling and then also foreclosure prevention counseling services as well. Fortunately, our foreclosures have been declining over the years, but still a valuable services for homeowners who are in need. Another thing I wanted to highlight was the Health and Human Services partnerships. My colleagues here, Pam Selvig and Danielle and others from her team, I think over the past several months you've heard many presentations from Health and Human Services, some of which relate to child protection, mental health. We partner with your team here to provide different housing resources. Just a couple I wanted to highlight is the Family Unification Program. This serves 25 households in coordination with Child Protection, so helping to reunite families with those resources, as well as the Bridges Program, which serves 13 households with mental illness in partnership with the Adult Mental Health Team. In addition to these partnerships, I think within the workforce housing developments, I just wanted to highlight that there have been a number of units that have been designated to serve homeless households. So not only is it increasing the supply of housing for our workforce, it's also helping to do a little bit to chip away at the growing homeless issue here in Scott County, as well as designate units for people with disabilities. So we've added 23 homeless units and 18 for disabled households. The CDA also administers a number of rental assistance programs. These are programs that we administer in partnership with federal partners as well as state partners. We are serving around 750 households in these programs, including just over 1,500 children. The average age of children in our households is 8 years old. So it's certainly a critical time to have stable housing as they are learning and growing and developing. And finally, if we can get the little technology to work here, I'm going to show you the fly around that you had the opportunity to see recently during a board workshop. So this is our latest proposed development, Brentwood Court 2. Brentwood Court, the current campus is 50 units of affordable market rate housing for seniors. There's also a library on this site, a pharmacy, and a clinic. The proposed development would add 59 units of affordable market rate housing, bringing the total up to 109 units for our seniors. So certainly the increase of those units will go a long ways to support the vitality of this development, including the pharmacy and the clinic. You know, by building senior housing, it opens the previous unit that the senior is moving out of for another family in the community. We've shared a lot over the last couple of years about life cycle housing, and as people age, their household circumstances change, and so do their housing needs. So by developing senior units, they really benefit various households in this cycle. I think it started over, so I'm going to let it stop. X out at the top. Thanks, Tracy. All right. Our next area is cooperating with communities. This particular area is about informing, listening, and syncing community aspirations to develop solutions that have a positive impact for the citizens of the county. I think no greater example was the celebration yesterday of the groundbreaking for that particular initiative. And then the other thing I wanted to add in this area is when the Live, Learn, Earn initiative had the community engagement back in 2018, we heard from our Hispanic and Latino communities in Scott County that they really had a desire to learn about homeownership. And so we have partnered with two nonprofits, Clues and NADA, And they are now providing homebuyer education right here in Scott County in Spanish for those homeowners. We've had 2 classes so far, and we've had 33 households that have gone through that class. And we're continuing just to look at what are the other culturally relevant classes that we could bring for homebuyer education as well. And then I think Stacy has a couple more things.
Hello again. So just touching on Live, Learn, Earn, we mentioned it earlier. You're very well aware with what that initiative is. It's an initiative that the CDA has been involved with since before it even became an initiative, both on the housing side and the workforce side. And we've really taken it to heart in trying to incorporate the feedback and things that are coming out of that initiative into some of the things that we are doing internally within the CDA, and helping to provide some of the direction that we are headed. Additionally, in the spring, early summer, Julie and I went out to each of the cities and we held joint economic development and housing meetings with the city administrators and key planning staff within each of those cities to really try and, I guess, hit home the fact that First Stop Shop and economic development is a part of the CDA. We have been for the last 7 years. And we really want to try and make sure that the communities understand that on either of those sides and together, we can all work together to try and push forward those types of projects within their communities. One thing that we also want to make sure that we throw out there is that as we've gone through this whole rebranding process, and we've gone through the rebranding even with scale, and heard some of the feedback that's out there related to economic development and what the CDA specifically is doing, is that we're looking for opportunities. We're open to challenges on saying, hey, we think you should be more active in economic development as opposed to maybe more of a passive role like you were intended to have when this whole thing first started. And we've been evolving along the way, and we're open to doing that. We're starting to look at how we might be able to step in and fill some of those gaps as it relates to maybe a rural industrial park or opening up some additional land or doing some redevelopment. So those are all things that are on our radar, and we plan to continue to pursue those and see where it takes us, but we're always open to those different ideas that people have. So if you have feedback for us based on things that you're hearing from constituents or throughout the different communities that you represent, certainly feel free to let us know what those things are so that we can see how they fit into what we're currently working on and how they might fit into future plans. Turn it back to Julie.
We're heading into the finish line, I promise. So the last one here is to support all people's lives. Hopefully you've seen the examples that we've shared, that we really are treating communities with fairness, care, and understanding to help all people in Scott County find prosperity. This past year, the CDA has had an opportunity to partner with you folks here at the county as well as the University of Minnesota Resilient Communities program. And Molly Link, our assistant housing director, had the opportunity to work with 3 different classes over the past year. And the goal of her work was to increase landlord participation in our rental assistance programs and to dispel myths about residents in those programs. So as we close out our slides, we want to share with you Jason's story, and then we'll turn it over to Bill, who will wrap it up. But Jason is a current participant in one of our rental assistance programs. Students in the courses at the University of Minnesota actually filmed everything. They worked with their professor and an Italian filmmaker who came and helped them with the film as well as the editing. So we hope you enjoy this.
I started at the CDA in 2016, and that's when Jason came in for his recertification. That was the first time that we met. And he was so organized, and he had everything together, and he was, I think in that appointment you pulled out your picture of your niece and nephew, I think, to show me, and I thought this person really loves their family, and you know, just really is just a normal person who is receiving our assistance. And so then we worked together for the last 2 years. And
my family means so much to me, you know. It's the closest support system that I have, and for them, I'm very grateful. But one thing I'm always reminded of, cherish loved ones. I'll tell you, in life, cherish loved ones, family is so important, you know, very important. I'm on disability, medical-based disability. I'm able to only work part-time because of the disability itself. I work at the Speedway in Chaska off of 41 Hardmark Road. I've been going on that job for a little over 17 years. During the week, I'm very fortunate to have the time to do volunteer work at a community soup kitchen called Loaves and Fishes. I had done work with St. Gertrude's Nursing Home in Shakopee. I had done work for them. According to the records, I'd volunteered for 17 or 18 years. Helping the elderly, just being a friend to them and being there for them. So that meant a lot to me. And then I figured it was my time to move on. Then I started Loaves and Fishes. I usually do the beverage drink table, coffee, milk, water, tea, etc. Work with wonderful people.
Site opened actually September 26th, 2010, so we're coming into our 9th year, close to our 10th year that we're on right now. Jason's been here that whole time. Started out serving drinks and beverages to people down here. He's still doing the same thing. In fact, he runs our table over here, and that's kind of his niche, his area. You don't want to fool with it. You don't want to mess with it. But the nights when there's 120 people in here, I don't think there's anybody in here that he doesn't know their name or take a minute to make conversation with them or help them feel at ease or help them with what they're doing down here. The other thing about Jason is that he feels that the community has really helped him out, and probably in particular, you know, with his housing and whatever, and feels a really strong obligation to repay back to the community. And it's a real strong desire in him and something that he's more than fulfilled coming down here. So.
I'm very grateful to Katie for all she's done for me, for the CD, and for everybody else. Just very lucky, very fortunate to have her here. Bill Jaffa, and then Molly Link, and some of the other people, and Katie, and wonderful people to work with, caring, kind people, and tax dollars well spent.
I think Jason is, a great example of someone who's using the opportunity of having the housing to, to really just have a full life of work, when he can, and, volunteer and give back, but also spend time with his family. And, this really just enables him to have a secure home and to be, really part of the community that he lives in.
Just grateful. It's one word that I have just to say about this whole situation. Gratefulness. Real grateful.
All right, hopefully you enjoyed that, and we'll turn it over to Bill.
Well, thank you, Julie, Stacy. Great job on the presentation, a lot of excellent information. Our 2020 development roadmap, obviously the Ertz facility, Brentwood Court, and then supporting our workforce housing developments are the primary objectives for 2020. One thing I wanted to point out that with our senior housing, each community that we build in, we are working with a redevelopment effort. I'll give you an example. Northridge Court right here in Shakopee, right up on First Avenue. And Mike, I'm sure will remember that property because that was the old sand pit. And that was donated by MnDOT to the city. And Bob Sweeney always referred to it as the biggest sandbox in the city because you couldn't access it. No development. The city wanted to have a parking lot up on First Avenue. You could not take Fuller Street down to Levy Drive. So what the CDA did, the HRA at that time, is we stepped up and said, look, what we can do is we will purchase a property and we will build you a parking lot on First Avenue. In addition to that, we will open up Fuller Street, put in a semaphore, so now you'll have direct access to Levy Drive, work with you on a second parking lot further down to the east, and for that, we will exchange, now that it's open, we will build Northridge Court for the senior housing population that's needed. And again, affordable market rate senior housing. That's one example. And you might wonder, well, gee, where is the CDA getting the money or the HRA at that time? Well, around that time, we did have some federal dollars, and we were able to take tax forfeited property behind the Super America, and we built the urban village. And the money that we received for the land cost, we applied that towards the purchase of the house on First Avenue and also towards opening up Fuller Street. So that's an example of the kind of activity that takes place with each senior development. Now, the one that's currently on the table, we have a clinic and a pharmacy. And as I indicated before at a workshop, and Tom remembers this well because his family had the last pharmacy in Jordan, I believe it was 1998. And then that pharmacy left. We have leases with the pharmacy and Alina, the clinic. We own the clinic and the pharmacy. In order to maintain those leases when they come up for renewal, rather than having a campus of 50 households, we're going to go to 109. So the incentive is there. It also supports the library, which is a big piece of the development. And in addition to that, the CDA also donated the land to the land for the library was donated to the city. I just wanted that to be on the record. So that's the main thrust. We're building out the final leg of that campus. And hopefully all will go well and we'll have another groundbreaking here. But I just wanted to point out that each one of our redevelopment activities that include senior housing is not just to do senior housing. Now, the 2020 tax levy, which is what we're here for this morning, is tied to taxable market valuation. Between 2018 and 2019, that market valuation increased by about 6.8%, 6.08%. So for 2019 to 2020, it's anticipated to be 7.68% for a total of $248,325. So that's what we're here today for, is to go ahead and, by the way, it's tied to a formula that's fixed by state law. So, we have no control. We don't have general taxing powers. So it's a fixed formula that's tied to taxable market valuation. So with that, I'll end and we'll take whatever questions you have, commissioners.
Thank you. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Colleagues, questions or comments for the CDA team? Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, I just have a couple for Stacy, if I may. Stacy,
You certainly may.
Thank you. Yeah, I was familiar with something called the Tech Village that Norex over in Prior Lake had started at some time. Has that morphed into something new, or had that gone by the board by the time you came on board here?
Well, Technology Village began right around the same time the First Stop Shop began. Okay. So we're just about 7 years, 7 years ago is when it officially started. And the city of Prior Lake did work to get that started. There's been a lot of discussion about the space being used at City Hall, whether or not the city wants to use that for something else. If this program continues to expand, which right now, for the first time, we actually have a waiting list of companies that are wanting to find space that would be similar to what we have in Technology Village, and we just don't have room for them. So the idea is, how do we take this potentially out of that space so the city can use that for something city-related? and really continue to provide this opportunity for these entrepreneurs and new businesses in the county.
I think it was Norex that had something there by Franklin Trail that was hugely popular and apparently worked quite well. You also spoke about Fast Track program.
Yes.
I'm familiar with the Fast Track program that the University of St. Thomas had. Is that related to this, or did we just happen to capture a name that fits rather well?
I'm going to say I believe we just captured the name because I don't know that we have any connections to that. And the Fast Track Challenge that we do in Scott County, we're now in our 3rd year of offering this. It came about through Technology Village and through the Technology Village board, in that we wanted to provide what we call kind of a Shark Tank-like competition for businesses. So over the course of the summer, businesses have been able to apply for the challenge. Applications are now closed. They've gone through the reviewing process. Finalists are identified and are being notified, and the competition itself will be held at the end of October.
It's a little different than what the St. Thomas one was running, but still sounds like one that our emerging businesses could probably benefit from.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Great. Commissioner Ulrich.
Years ago, I don't know exactly how long ago, the county was asked the question, do we want to be involved in economic development or economic growth? You know, and we really hadn't been so involved. And we said, yes, we do. And then a lot of initiatives came out of that, like the First Stop Shop and economic gardening and so forth. And then the CDA has kind of picked up that ball and run with it very well. Well done, excellently carried the ball. I am a little concerned that now the county, we feel a little disengaged. I'm looking for more of a vibrant connection between what you're doing with the CDs, doing on economic growth and development and so forth, and us, and to keep that alive and keep us pushing hard on that alongside you, and not just kind of delegating it to you. So I don't know what that looks like, but there's a dynamic. I'm just thinking, how can we energize that and work together, pushing together?
Well, one thing I'll speak to with that is that I'm really looking forward to is in the past, when Gary Shelton was the county administrator, we had regularly scheduled meetings, and we would stay in touch and in tune with what was going on in the county and what was going on at the CDA. We are resuming those meetings with a couple other people from the county and Leslie, beginning either at the end of this month or early October, where we will have those regularly scheduled meetings again, where I think a lot of that discussion can happen to say, what is it that you're working on? What are you seeing in the communities? How does that tie into what the county is looking at doing, or where can those gaps be filled so that we can better work together?
Great.
Comments for you.
While you're up there.
Yes.
How are we doing on changing that narrative with, it's Scott County, go to them for big box distribution? Like, are we winning that war? You and I have had some offline conversations on that.
We have. I believe we are. I think that from what we have heard, we're still struggling. I'm going to take a step back. We're still struggling with the fact that when we first started, there was quite a bit of land that was open and available and ready to go. And as those pieces have been picked off, we're now in a position now where we need to figure out where those next opportunities will come. And I know that the city of Shakopee has been looking at, what do we do on the west end? New Prague has their industrial park that they have put money into and used the CDA's EDI grants to help push through to the point where those sites are available. We've been working a lot with Elko Newmarket, especially through the EDI grant program, to try and get some sites ready out in that part of the county. So I think where we're at, related specifically to your question, is that there is a recognition that Scott County is more than just warehouse and distribution. The question now is, what direction do we want to try and maybe guide the county to go? And some of the conversations that we've had related to low unemployment and maybe not necessarily feeling that there's a need to push a whole lot of incentives or whatever it might be, I guess I would throw out the question, you know, are we sure that we shouldn't be looking at what it is specifically that we want the county to be looking like in 5 to 10 years from now, and not just waiting to have the economy change before we decide that it's important to look at maybe some incentives or how we better engage these businesses that we really want to end up here. And maybe we need to do something more proactively on a whole countywide level to continue to pursue those businesses despite some of the conditions that we're seeing right now.
Well, and my only other question would be is just in general, and I'm going to jump on John's kind of, you know, disengaged or whatever, because I've always, so now I'm switching gears from First Stop Shop, but there has been this weird, and Bill knows me as the broken record, but like we're here to approve your budget, but it's just odd, like we don't really have any engagement, I guess. I mean, I am going to be approving it. It just, I don't know what it looks like, but I would like to see something more engaging, I guess. Using your term.
Yeah, to answer your question, we're a special act of the Minnesota State Legislature. And within that legislation, it spells out the approval process. And each elected commissioner under the statute appoints a commissioner that makes up our board of commissioners. So that's your vessel to our board, and then there is a liaison that's appointed by your board to our board, and that has been John Ulrich, who's been at just about every one of our meetings. I can't remember too many that you've missed. So that's where the connectivity is there. The real connectivity is that we have a great partnership working with county administration, county human services, and through that internal spear, if you'd call it, we're able to make sure that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And as a result, things are happening here in Scott County that aren't happening anywhere else. And other people look on with envy. I think your ERTS facility, incidentally, is going to be the prototype for the state, because it really hasn't been done on this scale. But again, it shows what, you know, a coordinated effort can become, and that's just one small example. But again, we're governed through statute, and that's how it works.
All right, here and then here.
Clarification, just to, I'm learning I need to clarify my comments. In no way am I saying that there's not good work being done. I mean, everyone knows you are a juggernaut, right? Everyone knows that. So I'm not implying, it just has this weird feeling that maybe I can't quite articulate, but I am in no way implying that there's not great partnership.
No, and I fully understand that, Commissioner, and I understand. And it's all an education process.
Yes.
You know, one of the things I've always told our staff too is, you know, every day we're being rediscovered. And as that happens and we get involved in more and more programming, First Stop Shop, and you know, when Stacy was hired, I mean, this was an initiative that started with scale. And we were the ones that were chosen to be the vessel because we had the economic development powers. And so 3 years later, when those commitments went away, it just made sense to pull the First Stop Shop in as a division of the CDA, and it's worked out wonderfully ever since.
Commissioner Ulrich.
I just wanted to clarify that my comment about engagement, connection, whatever word you want to use, was about economic growth or development, not the CDA in total, but that one narrow thing where I thought if the county could be working alongside a little stronger and more engaged with you, I think that would be a good thing.
May I make a suggestion, Commissioner? One of the things that we need is we need to have a joint toolbox. It can't just be the CDA and the CDA resources that are going to help put things together and make things happen. It has to be a cohesive effort that involves the county. Now, exactly what that toolbox looks like is yet to be determined. We've had some discussions, I know, with Leslie on this in previous discussions with former Administrator Gary Shelton, but we've got to bring more to the table besides just, you know, where do we want to go? Okay, if we've got a roadmap, what can we put on the table to make things work? What can the CDA do? You know, what can the county do? What can the cities do? It has to be a joint effort for anything to really get to where we all want to be.
All right, thank you. Really good comments.
Madam
Leslie.
Chair, I just want to add to that. I think that we've seen a lot of improvement in the coordination. One of your strategies that's coming up, right, is around housing and the foundation. And in a call to Julie a little over a week ago as we were going through the strategy, Pam and Danielle obviously have a role in it on the counties, but it's bigger than just the county's role. But you talked about how do we convene. We can convene some discussions that then call out role and responsibilities, and challenging Lisa Friese's group that maybe as well as the Unified Transit Plan, we need to have this discussion on a unified housing vision and what are those tools and who has the rights to them. And how do we convene some elected officials from the cities, which I think is where LLE has struggled some, is that the elected officials, we've got builders, we've got bankers, we've got staff, but we need some of those elected officials there for part of that education and the discussion. So I think you're going to see in a workshop coming up on housing that Julie's going to co-lead this with people like Brad and Danielle and talk about this bigger bucket of housing, working together to talk about that. So I'm hoping as we continue these discussions, you'll see some of those things moving forward in that manner, jointly presenting and talking about what we can do together as a community, not just the county, not just the CDA.
I very much agree. So thank you. It was a very good presentation. I think what you're seeing today is this board's excitement, enthusiasm to get more involved for this to be even a greater partnership. I think we do have things in our toolbox, some of the infrastructure and other things that are being provided, and we just need to look at that together and put it in the same bucket a little bit. So really, really nice to hear. I love the new branding. Great to hear about the communication with all of the county and even some of the smaller towns that maybe haven't been able to have that success with the tax credit applications, but finding ways to work with them, because that's something a couple years ago I heard that people felt like was missing. So that's great. Thank you for that. With that, do we have any thoughts on a motion?
Madam Chair, if you're looking for a motion, I'll be happy to move to adopt Resolution 2019-133, approving the 2020 budget in the amount of $13,280,984, and the payable tax levy in the amount of $3,452,685 for the Scott County Community Development Agency, and to certify that to the county auditor. That's my motion.
Second.
Oh, you got it.
Thank you.
Oh, you're on the thing, yeah.
Been moved and seconded by my commissioners to my left here to adopt Resolution 2019-133. Commissioner Beard does much better with those big numbers. He must have been in the legislature.
I just had to show it up there, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this matter? Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And again, thank you. It was a
Thank you.
wonderful presentation. We're on to item 9.1, to ratify the setting of a public hearing at 9:30 a.m. or 11:30 a.m., I guess, on September 17th, 2019, to conduct that public hearing to receive public comment and potentially adopt resolution number 2019-134, which approves the preliminary 2020 levy for the Scott County Watershed Management Organization. I believe, Jeannie, could you advise we need a motion to ratify the public hearing? We haven't already set it? Or do we just need to open the public hearing?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, that's correct. It was overlooked and it wasn't actually set, so we do have the motion to ratify the date that was set by staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we ratify setting a public hearing for 11:30 this morning, this date.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to ratify this setting of a public hearing. Any discussion on that motion?
And Madam Chair, just to understand, it's because normally we set these in a period of time ahead of time, but since that was overlooked, we have to take this unusual, basically a suspension of the rules to do that this morning. So
Thank you.
I'd encourage its adoption.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Madam Chair, then just understanding, is the public hearing now open, or do you actually need a separate motion to open the public hearing?
I believe we need a separate motion to
Correct. You
to
wanna
open the
open
public
it.
hearing. Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we open the public hearing that we just set.
Second.
So moved and seconded to open the public hearing. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. This is a public hearing now open, and anyone here to speak may speak.
Good morning,
morning.
Madam Chair and Commissioners. I just
can go
have a
first.
quick PowerPoint presentation and overview for you.
Please.
Wonderful,
In
thank
case
you.
anyone's interested.
We are.
So I only have about 8 slides for you, but I just wanted to talk about some of the main drivers for our proposed levy and budget for 2020. The first is implementation. Our land and water treatment program is our largest program for the watershed management organization. We like to get things done. We want to continue implementing. So the majority of our budget goes to implementing projects. Secondly, the board approved at the end of last year a new watershed plan. So we have some new projects in that plan that we'd like to start implementing. Thirdly, with fewer larger capital improvement projects planned in 2020, staff effort will shift to complete some special studies that we have in the new plan. And then lastly, we have a staffing change. As you know, Paul will be leaving, so we'll have a new person come on board who will be leading the WMO from now on. Looking at our revenue for 2020, I just wanted to point out a few things. Overall, we have a decrease in revenue compared to 2019 due to mostly grants ending. So we have a few large grants that are ending in 2020. Additionally, I just want to point out that you'll see Cedar Lake Improvement District has a $0 amount in there. The reason for that is we haven't stopped partnering with them. We're still continuing to work with them on aquatic plant management in the lake, but we've decided to do something a little different as far as having the vendor invoice them directly, because it's typically a large amount that we cost share with them. And just for accounting purposes, it makes it easier if they pay an invoice separately, rather than the WMO take on all the cost and then have to ask for reimbursement from them. We are still working with the O'Dowd Lake Association. We've switched to a different treatment chemical, which costs a lot less, so that cost share with them is less. And then, excuse me, with the City of Prior Lake, we are planning a special study with them, so they are paying half of that share, so that's what the $25,000 is. They're paying $25,000 and the WMO is paying $25,000. But you can see off to the right-hand column, the bottom, the difference in total revenue from 2019 as proposed for 2020. In addition, the levy increase proposed is 3.9%. This is equal to the combined total of inflation and growth in tax capacity in the county. This is consistent with both the WMO and county policy for maximum levy increase. In addition, on there, you'll see the Bowser Watershed-Based Funding Grant. That grant is not going away. We are anticipating that to continue. We just don't know for sure if that's going to be in 2020 or in 2021. The state is still working on the draft policy for continuing that. As far as expenses in 2020, there is a decrease in expenses, again, largely due to we'll have less work on our large capital improvement projects, which is also then a reduction in consultant costs in our inventory and assessment program. As you can see, our land and water treatment program, again, is about 67% of our total expenses. That's our largest program. And that's also in line with our philosophy of getting things done, getting projects on the ground. Secondly, for 2020 is our education and outreach program. And thirdly is our administration. but our administration costs have been very consistent over the last several years. We've actually really brought them down from early in the establishment of the organization. They've now been about those costs consistently for the last several years. I also wanted to point out regulation is very low. That's also in line with our philosophy of building relationships and getting people to comply voluntarily rather than having to use regulation. You'll see also that we are putting back just over $67,000 into fund balance, leaving a proposed fund balance of just over $288,000. That is a little bit low for us. That's about 25% of our operating expenses, but that should improve because we are expecting more grants coming either in 2020 or 2021. I'm just going to touch on two of our programs quickly here. So you'll see, just breaking down a little bit further, our land and water treatment program. Just wanted to point out that our cost share incentives, that's the amount that is actually going to be able to be used for projects with landowners. And the technical assistance and staffing, which goes along with that. So it takes a lot of staff effort and time to work with landowners, developing projects, bringing them through the application process, putting together a plan, getting the project in the ground, and then certifying it. So there's a lot of staff effort, a lot of customer service that goes along with that, getting those projects in the ground. The other thing that I wanted to point out is we do have an amount in there for the McMahon Lake outlet. You probably remember that in mid-July, Paul came to you with board authorization to apply for a flood damage reduction grant, to apply for funds for McMahon Lake, and also in early August to get permission to do a temporary lake level drawdown on McMahon Lake. There are impacts happening out there with the high water levels. There's no way for the water to leave unless it evaporates or soaks into the ground, and we've had such an extremely wet year. So this $130,000 is the grant that we are applying for requires a 50% local match. And with the feasibility assessment that we did earlier in the year to figure out how much an outlet would cost, which was about $250,000, this would be the 50% cost share needed or required for the grant. Now, if we don't get the grant, we'll have to reassess. So it could be, maybe we decide the WMO pays for it all in advance, and the landowners, we would do a special assessment with them. They have agreed to that. The majority of the landowners that we've talked to, we've met with them a couple times, have agreed to a special assessment. Or maybe we decide to do another drawdown to bring the lake level down for another year. We did hear from one of the landowners out there recently that they invited Senator Pratt out to the lake to show him what's going on and the impacts. He's very open to wanting to help at the state level, so there may be more to come on that. And with inventory, I just wanted to point out the effort that we're partnering with City of Prior Lake with that Pika Creek. It's a sub-watershed assessment, so we'll look at the entire watershed and determine what projects might help with that water body. Also, we're doing that because the City of Prior Lake is planning on developing out that direction. So we want to get ahead of that development. And just to show you that the amount for county staff and project management in inventory assessment is for, we're going to focus more on some of the special studies that we have in the plan and not so much on capital improvement projects in 2020. So overall, or the bottom line with this is that we have decreases in both revenue and expenses for 2020. We are expecting more watershed grant funding. Just don't know exactly when that'll be or how much. Our total budget is, well, 67% of that is our land and water treatment program. This preliminary levy and budget does include a local match for the state grant for the McMahon outlet structure. This levy increase is $47,044 or 3.9%, which is the average market value residence impact is $1.16 or $37.04 per household. This does leave our projected fund balance at 25% of our operating expenses, and we normally like to be around about 35%. At the August 26th meeting, our Watershed Planning Commission did recommend this for approval. And lastly, this slide I wanted to show, so the blue portion of the bar shows where our levy is, and the red portion of the bar shows the grants that we've received each year. I just wanted to point out that in the early years, our levy really didn't increase for several years. It's just been the last few years that the levy has been increasing. The grants have been decreasing a little bit, but a lot of that was due to 2016. We got some pretty big grants, and so we were using up that money the last few years. I also wanted to point out that we were accepted for a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency 319 Small Watershed Grant. What that is, each cycle is 4 years. They want to fund us for 4 cycles, so over 16 years. So that would be a nice revenue income for up to 16 years to focus on some of our smaller watersheds and to continue implementing practices on the ground. I also wanted to point out that we typically in the past used to apply for Clean Water Fund grants mostly for our cost share and technical assistance program. We're letting our Soil and Water Conservation District do that now because they're the ones mostly implementing that anyway, and it just makes more sense for them to be applying for those grant funds. So, and with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? This is still a public hearing, so if anyone else wants to speak on this topic, they could speak, and then maybe we'll have some questions or comments for you. None. Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, seeing no one approaching the podium, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Public hearing is now closed. Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, we've heard about this extensively in several workshops, and the only regret I would have in passing this budget is it's the last one Mr. Nelson's going to have his fingerprints on. I'm trying to think of an amendment. But I think he's probably earned his retirement. So having said that, Madam Chair, I will move to adopt Resolution 2019-134, approving the preliminary 2020 levy. This is the preliminary 2020 levy of $1,253,314 and the 2020 budget for the Scott County Watershed Management Organization Special Taxing District.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this motion?
Just a question on what the resolution number really is. It's 132 in one place and 134 in another, it looks like.
Ooh.
Let's make it 133. We'll just split that.
I have 134 on the agenda, 134 here, 132 online.
Oh, am I looking at the wrong?
Nope, I'm not. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong thing too. I see 134 everywhere.
I think it's 134, isn't it?
Yep, 134 is
Okay.
everywhere.
All right.
All right. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you for the presentation. All right, we are on to item 9.2, our favorite topic, Danny Lenz presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and good morning, and yes, it is still morning. So we are here today to talk about the preliminary levy. I'm going to be talking a lot about the 2020 budget overall. I have to get my presentation up too, apparently. And just as a quick reminder, when we adopt the preliminary levy, it does set the maximum levy for us. We won't actually be adopting the final levy until December. The levy can go down but cannot go up after today's vote on setting the preliminary levy. And we'll be looking at that calendar where today we're at 9:17, ignore the first bullet. We'll be having another opportunity to talk about the budget on October 29th as well as in November. We have on December 5th our proposed 2020 budget and tax meeting, which is open to the public to comment on, with expecting to approve and certify the budget and levy on December 17th. So, over time, we've had very consistent board policy and direction in developing the budget, long-term fiscal stability while minimizing tax impacts, reasonable level and constant tax burden focused on modeling limited and relatively level increases, and managing limited resources over unlimited demands and providing the level of services necessary to meet the mandates and citizen expectations. In order to achieve that, we look at maintaining our fiscal stability overall as an organization, maintaining a structurally balanced budget, maintaining the county's reserve, maintaining our bond rating, which for this year in particular was incredibly important for 2019 with the building that we were currently in the process of building, as well as the project the CDA is getting ready to do at Brentwood. Plan and prepare for the future, and don't spike the levy, no surprises. So when we talk about a structurally balanced budget, it's not just that we don't have a surplus or a deficit, it's that we're looking at the needs of the taxpayers, clients, and staff in order to do their jobs, as well as the quality of the programs and services. And why this is important is that when we balance those things and we look at that every year, it helps us not to have 12, 13, 15% tax levy increases because we're considering all of those factors and not getting behind in certain areas where we have to then make up for it in another year. Our fiscal stability and county fund balance, where if you look back in 2009, we were below where the auditor said we needed to be, which is that greenish bar that kind of runs with the graph. And you'll see where we're at by the end of 2018 is we're well within that band, and we expect to continue to be in there. Maintaining the county's bond rating, we did have that reconfirmed earlier this year, and we actually improved in certain areas for our fiscal controls, and we expect to have that maintained coming up here in another few weeks. And then planning for the future. We do look out 5 years and we try and model in known expenditures plus inflationary increases. Right now we're modeled to stay, and this is our last year's model to show us kind of our starting point for going into the budget this year, right around looking at 4% while maintaining our fund balance and our operating reserves going into the year. Another piece that we also have been using for our long-term planning is our OPEB funding. We ended 2018 84% funded. We expect that to be 100% funded by 2022 in order to use those savings in order to fund the increase in the debt service so that we don't have to have an impact on the taxpayers for the new building we're constructing. I am very happy to be able to say that as of August 31st of this year, we are actually 95% funded. And so we're well on our way to meeting that goal and really realizing that long-term planning being a wise investment. And then net levy versus inflation and new construction combined as kind of a guide for where we end up on the tax levy. Now, this isn't a 100% guide. It's a indicator of where we're at, but showing that we don't really spike the levy. And this graph can be misleading because it looks like we have a very large increase going from 2013 to 2017, but it only looks large when you don't consider that it only goes up to 5%. We have very consistently below 5% levy increases, which I think a lot of our peers haven't been able to do that over time like we have. So going into the 2020 budget, what were the goals that we kind of set out for ourselves in order to look at? Fund salary and benefit increases, which are contractually obligated for many of our employees and part of keeping up with our philosophy. Maintain critical operations, increase our CIP funding, provide funding for the facility improvements we've been planning, and keep the levy within that 5-year forecast estimates. And what have we been able to do? We're maintaining the county's current compensation strategy, keeping employees competitive within our market. We're able to maintain capital while planned for the future. This includes CIP funding, financial system replacement, the medical examiner's facility, and the IRTS facility. Funding public safety functions to keep pace with our community growing. This includes things like adding staff to the 911 dispatch center as we're struggling with the capacity of the system as well as the JAF. Funding the state mandated services. This is largely driven by out-of-home placement and mandated court administration, things that we can't control but are required to pay for. Then utilizing technology to improve services and operations. We have the traffic management system that's improving the safety and efficiency of our transportation system. And then software that's allowing our current staff to meet growing service demand. A good example of this is in our adult protective unit when they're investigating financial crimes or financial exploitation, where they're able to do more analysis more quickly. Even though we've seen a significant increase in the number of those investigations, we haven't had a significant number of staff increases there. So in the dollars and cents of the budget, we're including almost $660,000 in new funding requests, the majority of that going to public safety and state mandated cost increases. We have some software licensing, about $96,000. That's just increasing due to the cost of services going up. Facilities capital replacement program to try and maintain what we already have, as well as some minor HHS program cost increases. Salary and benefits are the biggest driver at over $3 million for our budget. CIP funding is going up by $300,000, which is the last year of a multi-year plan to bring that to a place where we can stay on top of a lot of our CIP requests. Planning for our ERP system replacement, which is in for right now. Those utilities, postage, insurance increases that we just kind of have to go along with, and then also being able to fund the medical examiner's facility and incorporate that into our plan. With the revenue increases we have, we're expecting about a 2.7 million levy increase that's needed. That equates to a 3.95%. So a little bit other way of looking at this, having those individuals' costs in here, about 4.39 million in overall expenditure increases and 1.69 million in revenue increases that we're anticipating. I would like to note that that is a little bit lower than what we had expected going into the budget process and what we've typically modeled, and it's something we're going to be keeping an eye on. But that's lower than we've had in the last couple of years in terms of revenue increases, but that's what we've heard from the state, where they believe that's what we're going to be getting. And so again, that equates to about a $2.7 million gap. So looking at the overall levy, going from 68.42 million for 2019, plus the expenditures, less the revenues, another way of looking at that overall levy of 71.12 million. And just another way of looking at this, we have the operating budget. So that's going up by about 2.2 million. That's the non-capital expenditures and non-debt expenditures. Mostly that's made up about 80% of staff, so salary and benefit costs. About a 4% increase there, and our capital and debt is going up by about 3.8%, and that gets us to the overall 3.95% when you don't add those numbers together. We add the total dollars together, and that's where we come up with the percentage based on the growth from the total dollars from one year to the next. So looking forward, our planning. In our five-year financial forecast now, we've included total rewards, so salary and benefit growth estimates based on our existing labor agreements, plus some direction that the board has provided us. Additional debt service incorporates funding for the new building debt service. That's a shift, not an increase in the overall levy towards that. Medical examiner nurse facility, moving the treatment court fully onto the levy. Some major software updates we have coming on board, as well as transitioning to managed services, which you all received presentation on some of those technology improvements we've done today. And then some of the inflationary cost increases that we see coming based on historical trends in state mandated services, software maintenance increases, and those fleet and energy costs that we have. And with that, where we kind of are modeling our property tax levies now is to be very consistent with where we were last year. Hovering right at that 4% based on what happens with revenues, focusing on how do we bring it in underneath that. But on the costs we know are coming and the revenue we see coming in, we believe we're going to be in that area for the next 5 years. But we're pretty comfortable that we can stay within that as the upper bound for where we'll be bringing budgets in. Just looking at our operating budget real quickly, and this is a bit of a messy slide. But if you look at the yellow line, that is our fund balance as a percentage of our expenditures. The purple line is our overall expenditures, which includes all revenue sources as well, so including grants. The red line is our overall fund balance dollar amount. And then the green line is our cash flow coverage, which is how much we keep as a minimum, so that as we're waiting for those tax disbursements, we know we can continue to make payroll.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Danny, would you back up one slide for a second?
Yes.
Okay, the tan line is the levy absent us taking any other action, or is that anticipating the 4% every year going out to 2024?
So that is anticipating the 4%.
Okay.
So where we've built in those assumptions, so we have certain things included in our model that we know are going to be coming on board based on previous direction and agreements that we have in place. We want to bring the treatment court fully onto the levee. We have the ME's facility, we have some funding commitments for infrastructure, and then those other inflationary costs like out-of-home placement that have been going up significantly over time, and we don't have a choice whether to fund it.
Yeah.
We've built in a lot of those things so that we don't have those surprises. That's part of our 5-year planning to try and build in some of those assumptions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So again, included in the budget and fiscal model, in 2020, we're sitting at $2.5 million for our net levy in the CIP, and we expect that to remain consistent over time. The same with the TIP. And our debt levy is expected to go up, but again, that's a shift from our operating budget into the debt levy. And so overall, this kind of matches where we see that overall net levy going over the next 5 years. And so just talking again about our fiscal stability. Don't spike the levy, no surprises. You can see over the last few years, we've been consistently in between that 3% and 5%. We don't see ourselves getting too far away from that. I will note there's a bit of a gap from where we like to be with the inflation plus growth guidance. But I would note what I said earlier, our revenues were down significantly from where we had seen that historical trend. And that's really the biggest justification for having that gap there. So talking a little bit about the impacts of this to our residents here in Scott County. From 2013 and then through this budget, we continue to see our tax rate go down. 32.61%, which is over a percentage decrease from 2019. And overall, it's reduced over 8% since 2013. Residential property tax changes going into 2020. 53% of our residents will see a decline in their taxes from the Scott County taxes. We can't speak for all the cities and school districts, but our taxes, what they pay to us, 53% of our residents will go down. 47% will see a tax increase, with the majority of those being within a $1 to $100.
26 are in yours.
And then the county tax levy per capita. For 2020, we expect it to be $463, which is only a $47 increase since 2014. Not per year, overall, $47 is all that the tax levy per capita has gone up per individual. It's gone up about $317 for all communities, but that's only through 2019 because we don't have their 2020 proposed budgets yet. I would also like to note that these numbers are a little bit different for the population from what you've seen in the past for 2019 and 2020. The data source we've used historically is not available yet. So we used Met Council population data in order to bring that forward so we'd have some level of understanding of what the impact would be. And then the county levy as a percentage of total personal income. This is one of our community indicators for the organization. And we continue to go down in terms of the percentage of people's income that they have to pay to Scott County in order to provide the services we do to 0.75% of the per capita personal income. We consider this one of our primary focuses as we're putting together the budget. Again, we did have to use some numbers that were different than we have historically, but they all come from reliable data sources, either the Bureau of Labor Services or from the Met Council. So with that, I would stand for any questions and say that staff recommends adopting Resolution 2019-132, establishing a maximum proposed levy of $77,142,164, less $6,019,164 certified property tax aids for a net levy of $71,123,000 for the purpose of preparing the 2020 proposed property tax statements.
Good job getting that out.
Madam Chair, I'll put forward that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Ulrich. Second?
Madam Chair, I'll second that, and thank Danny for saving us the time of having to read the whole thing again.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask just, Danny, you said we're lower than other counties, and give us some comparisons, like Anoka, Washington. Do you have those numbers with you at all?
I don't have them that I can share as of yet, but I do know that looking at about 13 metro counties, there were only 2 that I believe were lower than us, maybe 3.
Okay.
And a lot of the others were above us. I would say they go as high as 6 or 8% in some areas. And even when they're lower, it's not by a significant amount.
Great, thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Well, we didn't make the standard disclaimer, I don't think, that's, this
Yeah.
number can go down.
He said it first.
Oh, did he say it first?
In the beginning, yes.
Okay, well, we'll say it
Could
again.
go down.
It can go down.
It can.
Commissioner Beer.
Well, I was just gonna reiterate, I mean, we've workshopped this, we're gonna have more
Yes.
workshops, there's arm wrestling and saber rattling and some sword fighting going on, and so, so this fulfills our obligation, right, to this, we gotta tell Big Brother that we're doing this, so, but I think it bears repeating, that it is preliminary, this checks the box of, it's not final, and you're gonna come up with a rabbit and some hat, I know, sometime real soon, which is gonna be so awesome, I can't wait to vote for that, rabbit out of a hat. I just wanted to make that comment.
And I guess I'd make the final comment that I feel like a little bit of the rabbit in the hat has been found. If we look at out-of-home placement costs, if we look at the increase in court costs, if we look at the fact that we're gonna increase the levy for less than the amount just that wages and benefits need to increase, I just need to thank staff for the job they've done. All the divisions, all the departments work hard for Scott County residents, and sure, even though every single one of us up here would like to see that number a little lower, I'm very grateful and thankful to the hard work that has went into that, the real thoughtfulness in getting us to this point, even though it may go down. So, yes.
Madam Chair, Danny, will you go back to the fund balance one? I want folks to look at that. Commissioner, Beard raised a really good point about being at that 4%. So with the 4% projection, you're looking at 30%, which is the minimum of the state auditor's recommendation for a county of our size. And the 5% is right about the threshold. Steve gets nervous when May hits and we're at 5%. So this is something for us to be conscious of and to be talking about. This is what that 5-year model is supposed to be engaging these discussions in. If you went back to historically, I was here in 2008 when Danny showed that first slide and the things that we did to try to move us back into that band. And so I think it's something that as leadership we need to be talking about and conscious of here moving forward.
We can't get out of that band. I agree. Thank you for those comments. Any final comments before we vote? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to committee reports and commissioner updates. Commissioner Wolf, would you get us started?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. On the 3rd, I was at Newmarket Township. Little thing to report is that the YMCA is still waiting to get going. It's been wet out there and having a little bit of a struggle with some of the road issues that might be taking place on which roads they might close, and people can get in and out to their houses, and so I'm not a big fan of closing down the roads and people have to walk 600 yards to get to their house. I don't think that's fair at all, so we'll see what happens there. On the 9th, Planning and Zoning had their monthly meeting, just a couple approvals there. Also, I was at the Planning and Zoning of Prior Lake City. They had a couple things they were talking about with the new development near the ponds and the administrative building over for the school there that some people are concerned about. Then I was out at Cedar Lake Township after that for their monthly meeting. On the 11th, the Emergency Service Board had their monthly meeting. And then that afternoon, Elko New Market City met with the administrator and our administrator, Leslie Vermillion. Talked about a few things. For the 10 years or so that I've been here, we've been waiting for something to happen out there, and hopefully we have maybe something that can happen through the CDA and just get a spark, because everybody's out there waiting for someone to make a move to get water and sewer somewhere so that they can hook on, because the costs individually are so high, and the first guy that does it is going to pay the biggest amount, and then everyone else can kind of tag on and make a bunch of money out of that. So anyhow, it's hopefully we can get something going on that and get paid back over time on that. So on the 12th, the I-35 Solutions Committee met. Things are going good there. They have a lot of construction on that road. Hopefully, still looking at a couple of years until that's done. Then that evening, I was at Elko New Market City Council meeting. They went over their budget and levy. They're looking in a little over 6 range at this point. They're hopefully going to bring that down. Spring Lake Township met after that. A couple of reports and a couple concerns about McMahon Lake being so high. People are getting frustrated with that. And then on the 16th, I did meet with Eric Pratt about the McMahon Lake and what he thinks could happen and how the state could get funding for that lake to get the permanent outlets that water will drain always instead of us having to pump it, you know, whether it's 1 year or 2 years or whatever. So then we had the ERTS groundbreaking yesterday. I thought that was very good. It's a long time coming for that. I think it's going to be a great project. I was at Prior Lake City Council meeting. After that, they are going to hire Jason Waddell as their new city administrator. So I don't know if he's accepted that yet or not, but I just offered him. And then the Community Fest over in Savage last night, very well attended. A lot of people there, a lot of good stuff. And so that's a good thing. I just, one other thing, the Fall Festival in Jordan on Sunday. Always a good time and a lot of people there. So that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Beer.
Thank you. On the 3rd, had my monthly administrator meeting, and I think we still need to go through part of that agenda, if I'm not mistaken. Very good conversation as always, and didn't make it through the whole agenda. On the 5th, had our quarterly meeting with Shakopee, which is always important to keep you know, good relations with our fellow cities and in our jurisdiction here. On the 6th, choose not to use. Thanks for everyone who helped and tried to chase a white, I don't know why I'm looking at you, Pam, but chased a white ball around a, how many mulligans? No, just kidding. Oh, and there's Barb. Barb, you're back there. Relax next time. Too serious. She's too serious. She's so serious. She wanted those hole-in-ones to make good on Gary's insurance, but he sponsored a lot of the hole-in-ones. It was a great event, so thanks for everyone that was out there and playing or helping. Weekend, I think was it festival weekend? Jordan, and coming off our joint meeting with Carver, I happened to be going through Steamboat Days in Carver, so trying to keep good relations with our folks across the river.
Parade. It's a great parade.
In the Prior Lake VFW chicken feed. Good night, is that tasty, and I almost missed it. I almost missed it with softball, but my daughters. On the 10th, Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed. The 11th, we did do MESB together on the 11th. And later that day, met with the post-secondary group, kind of turning, you know, making sure we're all on the same page, even though we're coming at it from different perspectives. So it was a very good meeting to kind of move that needle. The 12th was Fish, and they sponsored, or however you want to say that, Treehouse was the speaker. Really compelling. It was heartening to see some of our folks are already kind of looking into ways that they can partner with Treehouse here in the county. Then right after that, I met with the new campus pastor at River Valley Shakopee. What a great pulpit name. Zeus Vital. Huh?
Wow,
I mean,
nice.
he's preaching Sunday. I almost want to go to see if it's confetti and smoke screen and lights and sirens. Zeus Vital. So welcome to Shakopee and Scott County. And then on the 16th, ERTS groundbreaking, as was mentioned. I think that'll be a great facility to get people the help they need and save taxpayer money. A great two-pronged approach. Also was at the Prior Lake City Council, where they, after several motions, went to their, I think, 699. I'm looking to my right here. Is that what, I think that there was 3 or 4 different motions back and forth. Till 699, I think, is where they landed for their preliminary. And also the Prior Lake High School Community Fest in Savage to make sure I get both of that covered. Super. I went early and it was packed. You went mid to late and it was packed. So it's just great to see the community coming together for in different ways. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beard.
Madam Chair, on the 5th, Commissioner Ulrich and I had a Transportation Committee meeting where we discussed the timeline for several projects that are coming up here over the next couple of years. It was a good meeting. We also discussed some of the transit spending, and once again, I raised the issue of when the sales tax levy expires, my intention is to not renew it until there is an intervening election, so we'll see how that works out, but just so you know, that's on the table. That evening, I joined Commissioner Beer with the meeting with the mayor and the city administrator and city of Shakopee and talked through several issues. It was a good meeting to do that. And then I had about 13 days of personal vacation, so I had nothing else on my agenda until this morning. You'll notice I was conspicuously late getting here this morning because there was City of Shakopee called a key leadership meeting and specifically asked that I attend over at St. Francis. Something regarding an innovation institute that they're trying to create or considering within their economic development department, City of Shakopee. As I sat and listened to the presentation from the dean and one of the professors or doctors from Minnesota State University Mankato, and what they would look for in establishing an innovation institute of some sort, which is basically post-secondary education facility here in Scott County, particularly Shakopee. I was reminded that we've talked about this at scale for some time, and that a couple of the other cities also have expressed some interest. So when it came time for comments, I did make that comment that I applauded them for their initiative, but reminded them that this actually is a scale thing that's kind of going on, and some of our staff, Stacy and Jake was there, Barb I think was there, taking this all in and probably wondering the same thoughts I was. Is Shakopee going this alone or not? And they assured us they were not, although a Marine is in charge and he was just going to take the hill, darn it. And I get that about Marines. I have a son that's a Marine. That's just the way they are. So God bless the Marines. Hoorah. So Shakopee is kind of leading the initiative there. And we'll be bringing it to scale, I'm sure, to talk about what they are learning as they kind of move that ahead. No decisions were made this morning. I think information was gathered and facts were shared, and community leaders sat around and listened to the whole thing. One thing I might point out, too, back to the city of Shakopee, while we're speaking of Shakopee, their bond rating is currently AA small a, and they're on the verge of becoming AAA rated as well, which is kudos to the staff and the city of Shakopee for looking out for their taxpayers and achieving the maximum bond rating they can get. Madam Chair, that's my report this week, and I'll actually be in town for the next 14 days, so we might have more to talk about.
I bet you will. Great. Commissioner Ulrich.
On the 4th, I attended the Parks Commission, and we toured the old maintenance shop. I was trying to see if that's been torn down yet. If it's not, it's going to be torn down momentarily, and the project will begin. That's an exciting project for our park district. The 5th, I attended a monthly meeting with Leslie, and later that day, we had a transportation committee, and we went over, as you said, project timelines, and then later that day, the Fish Executive Committee. Then the Scale Executive Committee on the 6th. We're working on mission and vision and values and how to better communicate that. And we're going to do that on our agendas and with our new leader orientation and a state of scale presentation every spring, and the new website. On the 10th, I had an event in Savage with the 495 route. There's going to be now 6 stops in Savage each way, beginning about 9:50 in the morning, 10:50, 11:50, 5:50, 7:50, and 9:46 eastbound, and then a similar westbound kind of schedule. 6 each way, 7 days a week. That's going to be very exciting for Savage to have that. That goes from Savage to Shakopee to Burnsville to the Mall of America, so it's a really good connection for Savage. 11th, attended Micah. The 12th, the fish meeting, which was the Treehouse, and their mission is ending hopelessness among teens, and I could really relate. In fact, they had a pretty cool story of some average, normal person, teenager that lived in Plymouth, was going to Wayzata High School and was homeless and all that kind of story. And I leaned to somebody and said, I was homeless and living in Plymouth and going to Wayzata High School when I was a teen. Some family took me in and kind of ended my hopelessness. In fact, just, I don't know, 6 months ago, I gave a birthday card and a little cake to the mom that took me, and she's now in 95 or something like that. But I consider that to be a person that rescued me, So it was really cool to hear their story with Treehouse. On the 13th scale, and then after that, the RTF board, and we got a little update on the housing, transitional housing concept out at the training center, and we're still, moving forward with the unfolding concept at this point. And then we also had a meeting preparing for a Ramsey County visit. They've got this group in Ramsey County that meets, and they want us to come and present what is scale, what do you got going, how's it working. That's coming up, and so we had a little prep meeting for that. I also got roped into a deal with Janet through Dave Unmarked. We're doing a podcast about scale for the League of Minnesota Cities, so that's coming up too. Anyhow,
Famous.
if anybody wants to fill in for me on that, I'm just kidding. Then the Earth's groundbreaking. That's into my report. Thank you.
Great, wonderful reports today. On September 3rd, I was out at Belle Plaine Township, and they were just really dealing with some road issues, trying to get some things fixed up before fall. September 5th, visited Helena Township, also same type of things, really working on road issues, preparing their budget for next year. September 6th, I helped out at the Choose Not to Use Golf Tournament, great event. That evening, as part of the Jordan Commercial Club, I worked at Heimafest, great crowd, great weather, Friday evening for the beginning of their event there. On September 9th in the morning, Leslie and I met with the mayor and city administrator of New Prague for our quarterly meeting to talk about issues between the county and the city there, specifically Highway 15. And of course, I must put a shout out that this weekend in New Prague is Dozinki Days, their town event. Friday evening will be the car show, and Saturday all day with the parade at noon. So if you want to have another weekend of festivals, head to New Prague this weekend. Later on September 9th, Leslie and I also met with the SMSC chair and administrator for our quarterly meeting. September 10th, I met with some folks from Beacon to talk, learn a little bit more about their supportive housing proposal that they want to build in Shakopee. I think they're going to also be meeting with each of you to try and describe more about their proposal and the niche that they think it'll fill. Later that day, I had my monthly meeting with Leslie just to discuss current topics. September 11th, had the Scott County Historical Society board, and I did share some of our comments from our workshop. Really talked, Bill Reynolds from the city of Shakopee was there also. We really talked about let's get some folks together to look at the future of that organization, county, city, Three Rivers, how everybody can be part of it, and really what it's going to take to transform it. So it might not happen in the next couple of months or maybe even the next year, but the process has started, and I think we had a lot of good players around the table there. On September 12th and 13th, I was in Alexandria for the AMC Policy Conference. Spent most of my time there in meetings for Health and Human Services Committee, really looking at our priorities for the year. One big conversation was making sure that counties' voices were heard on the DHS reorganization proposals, because some of them sound really, really good on television, but if you talk to our staff and think about how it will actually impact how we work, those proposals might not be the best. There might be some really better ways. We know there needs to be change there, but I think really important for the counties unified to be part of that conversation. Of course, on September 16th, that was yesterday, the Earth's groundbreaking. Just a very happy, grateful afternoon. This morning, before our meeting, I had my monthly meeting with Pam Selvig, and just one comment about that. I believe probably most people saw Sunday's front page Star Tribune article about counties and waivered services for people with disabilities, people with traumatic brain injuries, and very severe medically fragile cases. I really feel that article misrepresented counties' work. I think there was you look at averages for very small counties that maybe have one or two people, and the needs of those people are very different. Those average dollars, I think, were somewhat meaningless. Even here in Scott County, some of those programs only involve, less than 5 people. Those people are going to have very different needs. So I didn't like the picture that article portrayed. I did ask Pam to communicate some real facts about Scott County to each of us, kind of as a response to that article. So if people do ask us, we have those facts in front of us. because our staff are doing good work, and I think making sure that people are getting the appropriate services and appropriately stewarding money and taxpayer dollars too. So just a heads up that you'll probably get an email from her, and I hope you'll read it and ask questions. So that's the end of my report. Oh, yes.
Can I add an addendum?
Yes.
Yesterday, at the ERTS presentation, you did a very good job in recognizing everyone, and including Janet Williams. And I just want to say, again here, a thank you to Janet Williams for her work with the ERTS. It's a legacy kind of project that she should be very proud of, all her work, and that's come to fruition. And we have many in the room that also have contributed as well.
Definitely, thank you for that.
And Madam Chair, I was really sorry I could not be there. I got in late last night from vacation, but I was thinking about you, and sorry I couldn't be there to actually throw dirt and help break the ground. So
We missed you and extended your regrets.
thank you.
You're welcome. Leslie, do you have anything for us?
I just have a couple things here. One, I just wanted to provide a quick update. As most of you and some of the public know, we were hit with a malware last Tuesday that shut some of our systems down. And I think we have quite a few lessons learned from that. I think we did a lot of things really well. We discovered it, we contained it, we shut it down. It didn't go anywhere else. It was only on the first floor. There was no private data that was compromised. We had our security consultant in, within a couple days, installed some very specific software to find and clear it. Our staff wiped clean over 100+ machines. And then had them deployed all by Monday morning, except for Cindy and Julie's machines. So it was really remarkable working on the weekends, getting this done. I think there's some things we learned we also could improve in our communication that maybe didn't go so well. A couple things online that we'll get better at. I think we actually needed to operate just like an emergency situation, a room down there that we could probably improve on. But I think for the most part, our staff really did a good job of containing it, cleaning it up, and getting us back and operating as quickly as we could. And so just some shouts out to those folks down there, Joyce Alt and her team, and Cindy and Lena and these folks that put the time in to get this cleaned up and move it forward. They really did do a good job. And I think for the most part, we responded the way we would have planned to have done it, with some things that I think we could get even better at. The other thing is we have the work session coming up today on the draft strategies, and then the open library, which, has gone from kind of a major capital investment program to, I think, a way to get a couple of these libraries open fairly quickly and allow folks to get into that space. So it's a good thing, and looking forward to that workshop today as well.
Thank you. Any need for attorney-client meeting?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, nope, no need.
Wonderful, thank you. And following our adjournment, we will be reconvening again as the Scott County Regional Rail Authority, one of our exciting meetings of the year. And then following that, we will have the workshop on strategies and the library's extended access project. So is there any other business to come before the board?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, I'd like to call to order the September 17th, 2019 meeting of the Scott County Regional Rail Authority. The agenda has been distributed. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, it shall stand approved as distributed. You've received the minutes from our September 18th, 2018 meeting. Any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I'll move them.
I'll second them.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the September 18th, 2018 minutes of the Scott County Regional Rail Authority. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. First and only matter on our agenda is 4.1 to adopt resolution number RRA 2019-001, establishing a final levy of $0 for 2020 for the Scott County Regional Rail Authority for the purpose of inclusion in the proposed property tax statements. Since the levy amount is $0, I'm assuming we do not need a staff presentation, but does anyone have any questions?
I'll move it.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution RRA 2019-001. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Any other business to come before the Regional Rail Authority?
Madam Chair, seeing none, I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We will now head to workshop.